Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of cold stone, boiling oil, and a whole lot of creative paranoia. You've just been handed the keys to a medieval castle, or, more realistically, you've been assigned to guard duty. Either way, congratulations. You now live in a fortress built to survive fire, famine, war, and the occasional peasant revolt. And spoiler, you probably won't survive this. But don't worry, none of us do. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Seriously, no pressure. Also, drop your city and what time it is in the comments. I always love seeing who's staying up with me. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your castle isn't just any stone hunk on a hill, it's a masterpiece of paranoia and planning. Everything about it, from the awkward angles of the staircases to the sheer size of the outer walls, is designed to make an invader's life miserable. And you? You're one of the people lucky, or unlucky, enough to live inside. It's drafty. It smells weird. There's definitely a rat somewhere chewing through your grain supply. But hey, you're safer here than in a village with no walls and a fondness for getting burned to the ground by wandering mercenaries. You wake up to the sharp sound of a horn, a sentry doing his job. He's spotted something moving along the distant tree line. Could be a merchant, could be an army, or, just as likely, it's goats. Lots of goat-related false alarms back in the day. But you don't take chances. Not when you live in a world where kingdoms change hands faster than your aunt changes her mind about who's invited to Christmas dinner. Outside the keep, the land stretches in every direction. Rolling hills, twisting rivers, thick woods. The castle builders chose this hill not for the view, but for the advantage. Elevation equals defence. Anyone charging up that slope toward your gate is going to have a bad time. They're exposed, slow, and tired by the time they even get to yell something dramatic. You, meanwhile, have gravity, rocks, and sharp projectiles on your side. The castle itself? It's rough. Not fairy tale stone polished to a shine. No, it's hand-chiseled blocks, stacked like giant angry Lego, the mortar between them filled with whatever the local masons could scrape together. The walls are ridiculously thick. You try to count how many steps it takes to walk across the outer wall, and you lose track somewhere around 10. These aren't just barriers, they're statements. Go away, they whisper, and bring lunch. You'll be here a while. And then there's the gatehouse. You're pretty sure it hates everyone. It's not just a door, it's a killing zone. If someone ever gets through the outer gate, they still have to squeeze through a narrow tunnel while archers above play poke the intruder with arrows and, yes, murder holes. You didn't name them, but you appreciate the honesty. Life inside the walls is a mix of mundane and maddening. Chickens peck around the courtyard like they own the place. The blacksmith hammers away like he's trying to wake the dead. And there's always that one guy, you know the one, who insists on practicing the bagpipes just as you're trying to nap. The garrison isn't large. A few dozen men-at-arms, plus the lord's personal knights, some squires, and of course the castle servants who keep things barely running. You eat from the same stores that were stocked months ago. Barrels of pickled vegetables, sacks of grain, smoked meat if you're lucky. Fresh food is a distant dream. But you've got a well, an actual spring inside the courtyard. That's rare, and it's the only reason this castle hasn't fallen to a siege yet. Water wins wars. It also makes your morning bucket bath slightly less horrifying. But let's talk paranoia, because medieval castles aren't built with trust in mind. Every window is arrow-slit small. Every passage curves, narrows, or tilts awkwardly, especially the staircases. You ever notice how all the spiral staircases go clockwise up? That's on purpose. It gives right-handed defenders the room to swing swords down, while attackers coming up the stairs get nothing but wall in their face. And that's just the start. The whole castle is a maze of inner walls, courtyards, towers, and fallback zones. If one part falls, defenders retreat and slam shut a dozen iron-reinforced doors behind them. It's defense by exhaustion. The invaders may take the outer courtyard, sure, but good luck finding their way to the keep without being pelted with rocks, or ambushed around a blind turn. One particularly strange thing you hear about sitting around the fire with the other guards one night is the use of fake structures. Some castles actually built false doors, stairways to nowhere, or secret rooms that were just traps in disguise. One lord allegedly constructed a room that appeared to be an escape route, but anyone who entered found themselves locked in a sealed chamber with no exit, and, eventually, no oxygen. Charming. But even with all this stone and cunning design, scholars still debate just how effective these defences were. Sure, many castles held out for weeks or months, some never falling at all. Others, though, were taken within days, either by treachery, overwhelming force, or, embarrassingly, someone leaving the postern gate open. There's that famous argument among historians. Were castles truly impenetrable, or were they more about intimidation and power projection than actual wartime defence? You're not sure. You just know you feel better inside these walls than out there with the wolves, literal and human. And as the sun sets, washing the sky in blood-orange light, you take one last walk along the parapet. Below, the land is calm, silent, peaceful for now. But in the distance, a thin column of smoke curls into the sky. You squint. Another village burned. You tighten your grip on your spear. Tonight might be quiet, but the castle never sleeps. You wake early before the sun peeks over the horizon. The air outside your chamber, if you can even call that drafty stone box a chamber, is thick with cold and damp seeping into your bones like a curse. You rub your arms, tugging your cloak tighter, and make your way down a narrow spiral staircase that always feels one wobble away from launching you face first into the wall. The courtyard is quiet, save for the gentle clatter of a stable boy shoveling something unholy out of the stables, and a cook hauling sacks toward the kitchen. Construction is underway again. You'd think the castle would be finished by now, but in reality it's more like a giant stone patchwork quilt, constantly being stitched, added to, or entirely torn down by the whims of the Lord or the recommendations of a particularly paranoid advisor. Today, masons work on a new curtain wall extension. Thicker, higher, with a better angle to prevent scaling. You watch them lift rough-hewn limestone blocks using a primitive but terrifyingly effective wooden crane, and you can't help but admire the sheer muscle and grit it takes to build something this big without any modern tech. Just rope, wood, stone, and a whole lot of grumbling. It wasn't always like this. You remember hearing stories, maybe from your grandfather or an old soldier at the tavern, about the earlier days of castles. Back then, they were humble wooden things. A big fence, a wooden keep on a raised hill called a moat, and a courtyard called a bailey. Quick to build, quick to burn. If you had enough men with torches, you could end a siege in an afternoon and be home in time for soup. But wood doesn't last, and people catch on. After enough dramatic losses to flaming arrows and angry raiders with too much free time, the builders got smarter. Stone was slower, harder, more expensive, but oh, it lasted. And it sent a message. We're not just here for a season, those thick grey walls seem to say. We're here to stay, and also, don't even think about stealing our cows. Your castle has grown like a living thing, stone laid on top of stone, older towers merged with newer ones. The base of the keep still shows traces of the original rougher stonework, darker and moss-covered, while the upper levels gleam pale where newer blocks were placed just a decade ago. The architect, if you can call the long-dead mason who designed the place an architect, clearly knew how to lay a defence into everything. From the way the inner walls force attackers to enter through kill zones, to how the towers angle outward just enough to provide a better view and angle for missile fire, every corner has been calculated. You pass by the blacksmith's forge and nod to the smith, whose face always looks a few shades too pink for comfort. He's shaping iron reinforcements for the new drawbridge. It's part of a larger overhaul your lord has ordered. He wants the front gate stronger, faster to close, and more terrifying to look at. The last siege didn't exactly end in disaster, but it also didn't inspire confidence. A few enemy scouts made it alarmingly close to the inner wall, and now everyone's walking around acting like that won't happen again. In the Great Hall, the Lord himself is hunched over parchment and drawings, surrounded by advisors. They're arguing, something about the placement of a new flanking tower, and whether it should be triangular to deflect cannonballs. That's a relatively new idea, by the way. Gunpowder is starting to become a thing. It's rare and expensive and kind of terrifying in its unpredictability, but the mere rumour of it is changing how people think about fortification. You can't help but overhear one grizzled knight muttering about how walls need to start angling outward, not just going straight up. He calls it the Italian method, as if he invented it himself after too much wine and a bad vacation. Outside, you take a stroll along the newly raised wall walk. From here you can see the whole valley stretch out below, green and peaceful, deceptively so. You trace the line where the older curtain wall met the new extension. The stone's texture changes subtly, almost like the growth rings on a tree. Each edition reflects a different threat. This bit was built after the last Viking raid, that one after a siege from a rival lord. There's even a crude carving from some bored mason, 2 crossed swords and what might be a cow or a very fat horse. No one's quite sure, but construction isn't just about stone, it's about balance, weight, angles, forces. Some masons have spent their entire lives understanding how to make sure one wrong placement doesn't bring the entire wall crashing down. And there are legends, fringe stories, about castles built wrong on purpose. One such tale tells of a lord who insisted the masons weaken a tower from within, creating a hollow column so that, if ever captured, he could collapse it with a hidden lever. Whether or not that's true, no one can agree. Historians love to argue about these things. Did medieval engineers really have that level of subtle sabotage in mind? Or are we just romanticising paranoia? Either way, you walk past that tower a little faster than usual. Back inside, you help stack bundles of arrows in one of the armories hidden behind the Great Hall's tapestry-covered walls. The room is windowless, cool and cramped, lined with weapon racks and crates of ballista bolts. Overhead, the ceiling bears soot marks from a long-ago fire, one that supposedly broke out during a siege when a flaming projectile got lucky. Since then, no open flames are allowed in the armory. Lesson learned. Mostly. Before long, you find yourself helping to haul a load of quarried stone up the southern slope just outside the wall. The path is treacherous, muddy and steep, exactly the kind of route attackers would hate, and that's the point. The castle builders deliberately chose uneven, rugged ground to place their fortress. Steep hills, thick forest, and jagged outcrops all serve as nature's own defences. An army trying to storm this castle would have to navigate mud, dense undergrowth and arrow fire from 100 feet above, all while wearing armour and dodging surprise goat attacks. As you pause to catch your breath, wiping sweat from your brow with a linen sleeve, you glance back at the castle. It looms above you now, walls glowing golden in the afternoon sun, towers catching the breeze like sails and the distant clang of hammers and voices ringing out. It looks eternal, almost holy, like it was always here. But you know better. You helped build it. You've seen the cracks filled with moss, the repairs on repairs, the scaffolding that never quite comes down. Castles aren't perfect. They're evolving, growing, always a little paranoid, always getting ready for the next big storm. And somewhere out there, maybe beyond the forest or hiding in the valleys, someone else is watching it too. Measuring, planning, imagining how to bring it down. Let them come. You're woken by the smell of something foul. Not the usual someone forgot to wash their gambeson foul, but something worse, thick, murky and suspiciously organic. As you stumble out into the courtyard, gagging slightly, the smell punches you in the face again. It's coming from the moat. You know, that charming feature everyone assumes is filled with crystal clear water and maybe a duck or two? Yeah, no. This isn't a scenic pond. This is a defensive trench full of things you're better off not identifying. Moats are the unsung heroes of medieval defence, and they come in 2 delightful flavours, wet and dry. Yours is technically a wet moat, though calling it water is a stretch. It's more like a stew of rain runoff, dead leaves, frog spawn and, judging by the smell, at least one decomposing pig. The trench was carved deep around the base of the outer walls, its purpose brutally simple: keep enemies at bay, slow down siege towers, and make anyone trying to dig under the walls question every life choice they've ever made. The idea is elegant. Invaders can't scale a wall they can't reach, and they definitely can't wheel heavy siege engines through a ditch full of mud, spikes and disease. Yes, spikes. Some castles, including this one, planted hidden wooden stakes beneath the surface, pointing up like a trap for anyone unfortunate enough to wade through. They call it the kiss of the moat. It's not romantic. But there's another layer of genius here. You overhear one of the engineers explaining it to a group of new recruits. See, when the ground is soft and swampy, it becomes nearly impossible to tunnel underneath. And tunnelling is a real threat. Siege engineers often try to collapse walls from below. The soggy trench makes that impossible. That pig floating by, that's not just decay, that's insurance. Historically, moats were sometimes dry, especially in places without reliable water. But don't let that fool you. Dry moats could be even worse. Picture a 20-foot deep ditch lined with sharp stones, stakes, and narrow enough to turn into a death funnel. You fall in, and good luck getting back out before someone drops a boulder on you. Some castles even hid small pits within the moat, covered with foliage, like a particularly violent game of hide-and-seek. Surprise! You've never envied invaders, but staring down into the trench now, watching two men shovel muck and mutter curses about the smell, you feel an actual pang of sympathy. Sort of. But moats are more than just obstacles. They're psychological weapons too. A good moat says, don't even try. It's the medieval equivalent of a barbed wire fence with a beware of dragon sign. You can feel it when merchants or travellers approach. Their eyes widen, their pace slows, some even turn back. The moat announces the seriousness of the place, long before a single arrow is loosed. Of course, there are quirks to moat management, like drainage. One bad storm, and the whole thing overflows, turning the courtyard into a wading pool. There was that infamous time a few years ago when the drainage system got clogged with straw and, rumour has it, a dead jester's shoe, and water breached the wall. A minor flood, but enough to ruin half the storeroom and teach everyone a valuable lesson about medieval plumbing. There is none. Even worse is what happens during a siege. Normally you'd think, great, we've got a moat, we're safe. But once arrows start flying and ladders start rising, the moat turns into a liability for you too. Bodies fall into it. Debris builds up. The water gets fouler than usual, and the smell becomes unbearable. Disease brews like a stew in the sun. During one particularly nasty siege at another castle, something you heard from a travelling knight, the defenders actually dumped corpses into the moat on purpose, hoping the rot would sicken the attackers trying to cross it. Strategy or psychopathy? Scholars still debate. Still, your castle maintains its moat with stubborn pride. A few servants even dredge it every few months to keep the stench manageable, and, if you can believe it, someone once suggested putting fish in it for both food and mosquito control. The idea didn't go well. Turns out carp are not equipped for trench warfare. One strange story you once heard late at night, when the wine was flowing and the guards were chatty, was about a legendary castle said to have filled its moat with quicklime. The powder would burn flesh and blind anyone trying to swim across. Is it true? Hard to say. The logistics alone are questionable, but it's the kind of thing people whisper about to each other, hoping it's real just for how diabolical it sounds. You walk the perimeter, inspecting the narrow wooden bridge leading to the gatehouse. It's retractable, drawn up by chains and gears hidden inside a stone chamber. When the drawbridge lifts, it seals the entrance like a book slamming shut. The wood creaks beneath your boots, solid but aged. You make a mental note to mention it to the carpenter. The last thing anyone wants is the bridge giving out mid-siege. You'd rather not be the guy who lands face first in moat soup during a charge. And then there's that one weird section of the moat that never quite looks the same. It's near the eastern wall, tucked behind a small outcropping. The reeds grow too thick there, and the water bubbles more than it should. Some say there's a tunnel beneath it, an old escape route or secret passage sealed long ago. Others say it's cursed. More likely it's just a spring feeding in from the hillside. Still, you avoid it after dark. No need to test local legends when there's plenty of work that doesn't involve possibly being pulled into the water by ghost hands. All in all, the moat's a miracle of medieval engineering and an absolute pain to live near. The smell seeps into your clothes. The flies are relentless. But at night, when fog curls over the surface and the moonlight bounces off the water in pale ripples, it does look beautiful in a grim, don't-touch-it kind of way, like a trap pretending to be a pond. You head back inside as the sun starts to set, casting long shadows across the sloped banks and slick stones. The workers call it a day, wiping sweat from their brows and complaining about the usual, aches, rats, and one guy swears he saw something move in the moat that wasn't a frog. You don't ask for details. Later, as you eat your supper in the hall, you hear the Lord himself mention plans to expand the outer ditch, make it deeper, wider, more protection, more deterrence. Someone jokes about putting crocodiles in it, and everyone laughs, except the Lord. He's already asking where one might acquire such beasts. You take a bite of your salted meat, glance out the small window slit and smile to yourself. Crocodiles. Sure, why not? Add it to the list of nightmares. It's early again, and the sky above your castle is that thick, ominous shade of grey that promises either a drizzle or the kind of storm that washes livestock down hills. You pull your cloak tighter and trudge across the courtyard, where a fresh cartload of timber is being hauled toward the front of the castle. More repairs? Not exactly. Today, you're headed to the Gatehouse, the most suspiciously overbuilt front door in human history. The Gatehouse is the first and last place anyone enters, From the outside, it looks like a glorified stone arch with some fancy towers on top. From the inside, it's a medieval nightmare machine. You've seen travellers approach it cautiously, stepping through like it might bite them. Smart, because it very well might. Let's break it down. The gatehouse isn't just a gate. It's a sequence of traps disguised as architecture. First, there's the drawbridge, which gets lifted by a pair of counterweights that are so old and heavy, you half expect them to collapse through the floor. Then, once the bridge is up, there's a spiked iron portcullis that can drop in an instant, like the worst kind of guillotine. But say someone survives that, they still have to deal with a second portcullis deeper in. Double gates, because trust is for fools. You walk into the central passageway, the tunnel between the two gates. It's narrow, echoey, and chilly, even when the courtyard outside is warm. High above, there are arrow slits and trapdoors, murder holes, to use the charmingly honest term. Guards can rain down arrows, rocks, or hot sand depending on the mood. Boiling oil, not as common as people think, mostly because oil is expensive, but boiling water, heated sand, or quicklime. Absolutely. There's a dark patch on the stone floor here that never quite fades. The older guards say it's where someone once tried to charge through during a siege and ended up getting turned into a learning opportunity. You've never asked for more details. Some things are better left to imagination, or nightmares. The genius of the gatehouse is its use of space. It traps invaders between obstacles, slowing them, confusing them, forcing them to bunch up. You can't rush a gatehouse. You get funneled, shoved shoulder to shoulder, and then picked off from above like ducks in a barrel. If the outer gate falls, defenders can retreat to the inner gate and hold that position for hours, even days. You've drilled this. You've practiced sprinting to your assigned spot when the alarm sounds, and you've practiced what happens if the outer portcullis fails, which mostly involves panic and a lot of shouting. There's also a secondary gate tucked off to the side, a postern gate meant for sneaky exits and emergency access. It's tiny, low, and easy to defend. Only a handful of people even have keys to it. During the last inspection, you heard the captain threaten to wall it up entirely after discovering that some clever apprentice had been using it as a shortcut to meet a girl in the village. Romance in a castle? Bold, risky, smelly. One thing you've come to appreciate about the gatehouse is how it manages to be both over-engineered and wildly uncomfortable. The stairs are steep, the floors creak, the defensive machinery takes at least 4 grown men to operate correctly, and even then, the chains groan like something alive. Once, a noble guest from the city came to visit and joked that it was like being swallowed by a stone monster. No one laughed, mostly because that's a fair assessment. From up top, inside the gatehouse tower, you have a clear view down into the killing zone. It's one of the best views in the entire castle, and one of the least relaxing. You lean against the crenellated wall and look out toward the road leading up the hill. It's empty now, just a muddy line cutting through the forest. But you've seen it crowded before. Armies, pilgrims, merchants, bandits pretending to be pilgrims. All of them forced to funnel through this gate. There was one siege, years ago, long before your time, when the gatehouse nearly fell. The attackers brought up a battering ram shaped like a snarling boar, complete with iron tusks. Legend says it cracked the outer portcullis, and panic spread inside the walls like wildfire. But then a young engineer, some local genius with a hammer and a death wish, triggered a rockfall from the murder holes and crushed the ram flat. The boar's head still sits in the armory as a reminder. The gatehouse doesn't go quietly. Not everything about the gatehouse is grim. There's a certain beauty in its simplicity, a brutal elegance. Every stone, every angle, every little detail screams function over comfort. Even the artwork, if you can call it that, is practical. Carvings of snarling faces above the murder holes are there to frighten attackers, not impress nobility. They're psychological warfare in stone. There's even one that always makes you laugh, an absurdly angry face with its tongue sticking out. Someone once told you it was modelled after an old enemy lord, but it's probably just the mason's idea of a joke. You take your shift on gate duty. That means pacing, watching, and resisting the urge to stab yourself with boredom. Most days, nothing happens. You listen to the wind whistle through the slits, the distant clang of blacksmiths, and the occasional shout from the kitchen about stolen bread. But then, every so often, a figure appears on the road, and everything tightens. Today it's just a farmer bringing grain. Tomorrow it could be a scout, or worse, a herald bearing terms of surrender, or threats. You've seen those too. They come wearing smug expressions and bright colours, talking about diplomacy while holding maps that look suspiciously like invasion plans. The gatehouse is always the first to know trouble is coming. It listens, it remembers. There's a popular theory among scholars and history nerds that gatehouses became so elaborate not just because they were effective, but because they were status symbols. Lords wanted the biggest, most terrifying gate on the block to show off their wealth and power. It was the medieval equivalent of a giant front lawn filled with security cameras and flaming torches. Was it always practical? Not really. But when has overcompensating ever gone out of style? You finish your shift and step out into the wind, stretching your arms as the next guard takes your place. You can hear the gatehouse creak behind you, its iron parts groaning like a grumpy old man. It's a machine, after all, one that needs care, oil, strength, and constant vigilance. But when it works like nothing else. As you walk back toward the keep, you glance over your shoulder. The drawbridge is down, the gate stands open, but behind it all, you know the gatehouse is always waiting, stone silent and fully armed, just in case someone forgets who's really in charge. There's a wind today, sharp and insistent, the kind that whistles through the gaps in your armour and makes your teeth ache. You wrap your cloak tighter and head up the wall walk, that narrow path running along the top of the outer curtain wall. It's one of your regular patrol routes, and by now you know every loose stone, every uneven step, and exactly where the wind howls the loudest. You also know the wall listens. That's the strange thing. When the castle is quiet and the countryside is still, the walls seem to hum with memory. Curtain walls aren't just fences made of stone. They're the spine of your castle, and they do most of the heavy lifting, both literally and metaphorically. Your wall stretches a good 30 feet high, maybe more in places, and it's wide enough that 3 people can walk abreast without bumping elbows. If you stop and run your fingers along the surface, you can feel the rough scars from years of weather and war. Arrow chips, scorch marks, and the occasional strange groove no one can explain. The thickness is no joke either. These walls are anywhere from 6 to 10 feet thick at the base, tapering slightly near the top. That's not just to look impressive. That's physics. Thick walls absorb force better. When a battering ram hits, the energy gets spread out through the mass instead of cracking through. You've seen arrows bounce off them like toothpicks. You've heard tales of entire catapult rounds doing little more than chipping stone. But what makes curtain walls truly brilliant is how they're designed to work with everything else. They're not isolated. They're part of a layered defense system. Walls inside walls, towers at intervals, with interlocking fields of fire. If you're an attacker, that means you're never just dealing with a flat wall. You're dealing with geometry that hates you. As you pace along the walkway, your boots thudding on the worn stone, you pause at one of the crenellations. These are the famous up-and-down battlements everyone draws when they sketch a castle. Merlons and embrasures. The merlons are the tall parts you duck behind. The embrasures are the gaps you shoot through. Simple, elegant, and terrifyingly effective. You've crouched behind them during drills, feeling the rush of wind as arrows slice past your cheek. In a siege, this wall becomes your lifeline. You glance down to the base of the wall, where masons are reinforcing a section that started to bow out slightly. Stone might last for centuries, but it still shifts and settles. Someone once told you that these old walls are alive in a way. They breathe, they flex, they adapt. That's probably nonsense. Still, you can't help but feel like they're watching sometimes. Some curtain walls, especially in wealthier or more strategically important castles, have a second wall outside the first, creating what's called a concentric defense. That means attackers have to fight through an outer wall before even touching the inner one. It's a nightmare scenario if you're the one holding the ladder. You might take the first wall only to find the second raining down arrows, boiling liquids, or other creative horrors. There's a grim beauty in that kind of efficiency. And then there's the concept of the flanking fire. No part of the wall is ever left unguarded by another part. The walls are designed with projecting towers that let archers shoot along the face of the wall, not just out toward the field. So if someone tries to sneak up close, they're met with arrows from the side. The closer you get, the more angles you expose yourself to. It's like trying to approach a hedgehog covered in crossbow bolts. Today, you're checking the repairs along the western wall. This side faces the forest, dense, dark, full of birds and the occasional boar. Also, historically, bandits. One of the old-timers claims that a group of raiders once tried to scale this wall using a tree they chopped down and dragged for a mile. They didn't make it far. The wall walk is still stained near that spot. Whether from blood or berry juice, no one's really sure. Either way, it's a sobering reminder. One of the strange features of your curtain wall is a row of square holes spaced just beneath the wall walk. These are put log holes, used to support scaffolding during construction. Most were filled in later, but some remain open. They're too small for a person to crawl through, but sometimes you'll spot birds nesting in them, or worse, rats. During a siege, defenders have been known to pour hot liquids through these holes onto climbers below. You don't mention that part to the new recruits until after dinner. There's also a debate, quiet, among the historians who visit the castle from time to time, about whether these walls were always meant for defence or partly for display. Some argue that the highest sections and most elaborate towers were more about prestige, showing off the lord's wealth and power. Others insist that every foot of height is tactical. Honestly, you think it's both. What's the point of being safe if you can't also look intimidating while doing it? Another quirky fact you learned during winter repairs: some medieval castles embedded odd items inside their walls during construction. Shoes, bones, coins, even, supposedly, the occasional cat. Why? Superstition, protection, or just bored workers with dark senses of humour? No one really agrees. You found a worn leather boot yourself once, wedged behind a broken stone, and it's now hanging on a nail in the guard barracks, officially designated Sir Kicks-a-Lot. You climb one of the towers along the curtain wall and take a moment to look out over the landscape. The view is breathtaking. The woods stretch to the horizon, and to the north, a river winds like a silver ribbon through a patchwork of fields. In peacetime, this view is peaceful, but in wartime, it's a gauge. From up here, you can see movement long before it arrives. You can count enemy tents, watch supply lines, and track siege weapons inching closer. This tower, this wall, is your early warning system. As the sun begins to dip behind the hills, casting long shadows across the courtyard and lighting the top of the wall in warm gold, you run your hand along the parapet. The stone is cold but solid. It's held off enemies, storms, and time itself. And now it's your turn to guard it. You glance down again. Somewhere out there, someone might be planning to breach this wall, to bring it down with fire or steel or sheer audacity. But they'll have to get close first, and even then, even if they reach the base, they'll have to deal with the height, the archers, the murder holes, the crossfire, and the sheer crushing weight of stone designed with one purpose: to hold. So you stand a little straighter, you adjust your belt, and as the wind picks up again, howling through the crenellations like a ghost with complaints, you whisper a quiet challenge to the horizon. Come and try. You start your day climbing. Not the slow, polite climb of a tower staircase, but a lung-burning, leg-aching vertical crawl up the tight spiral of the southern watchtower. Each step is uneven, each one a little too steep, and the stone underfoot is slick with centuries of wear. Somewhere above, someone's dragging a crate of arrows, the sound echoing like thunder in a well. You pause halfway, panting, and remind yourself why these towers exist in the first place. Not for comfort. Definitely not for aesthetics. They're here to give the defenders something the enemy can't have: the high ground. You reach the top with a final grunt, stepping onto a cramped stone platform that feels just slightly too small for a human being with a full set of limbs. The guard you're relieving gives you a nod and a muttered complaint about the cold, and then he's gone, back down the stairs and probably straight to the fire. You settle in, adjusting your cloak and peering through the narrow opening in the wall, one of several arrow loops that give the tower its iconic look and its primary purpose. Towers are, without exaggeration, the beating heart of your castle's defence system. They're more than just tall blocks of stone. They're strategic eyes, ears and fists. From up here you can see everything: the fields, the forest, the outer road, and, if the weather's clear, the distant shimmer of another castle on the horizon, belonging to a lord who might be friend, enemy, or just an indecisive ally, depending on the latest gossip. The positioning of the towers isn't random. They're spaced just enough along the curtain wall to allow overlapping fire, meaning if someone tries to scale the wall between them, they'll be pelted from 2 or more angles. That's a problem for anyone who values their internal organs. Each tower is like a mini-fortress, complete with its own supplies, arrow slits, small ballistae if you're lucky, and murder holes in the staircases because medieval architects had trust issues. Fair. You lean against the wall and glance around. The tower's interior is cramped and simple: wood planks, a few benches, and a barrel or two for supplies. Someone's carved a crude face into one of the beams, a scowling knight with a nose like a turnip. You've spent hours here before, especially during harvest season when tensions run high and everyone expects bandits to make their yearly guest appearance. The solitude can be maddening. You once counted bricks for 2 hours just to stay awake. There were 847 before you gave up, but then there are moments when the towers become the most important place in the entire castle. Like during a siege, you flash back to last winter when a group of mercenaries decided they'd test your defences. Nothing major, a probing attack. But from this very tower, you watch them advance, try to flank the southern wall, and get chewed up by arrows from the tower to the east. The look on their faces when they realised they were in a kill zone, boxed in and exposed, was something you'll never forget. That's when you learn the towers don't just watch, they bite. Most of the arrow slits, or loops, are tapered, narrow on the outside, wider on the inside. That allows you to move your bow or crossbow within a wider arc, while still being almost invisible to anyone shooting back. It's a beautiful design, simple, deadly, and wonderfully frustrating if you're on the receiving end. And it's surprisingly effective at dealing with ladder assaults. Try climbing a wooden ladder while arrows rain sideways from 30 feet up. The results are somewhere between tragic and comedic. Today, you're not expecting trouble. You pass the time adjusting the weapon stockpile up here, double-checking the arrows, restringing a bow and kicking a rat out of the food crate. The sun's trying to break through the clouds now, and the view from the tower is spectacular. The world below is green and quiet. Smoke curls from the chimneys in the village. A line of carts winds up the road, bringing supplies, or gossip, or both. Peaceful for now. You glance up and notice something strange. A narrow ledge running around the outside of the tower, barely wide enough to stand on. It's part of the machicolations, stone projections with openings through which defenders can drop rocks, boiling water, or less charming substances. You once heard of a siege where defenders dumped fermented animal guts through the machicolations. Whether it was effective or just deeply unpleasant is still debated. But tower design isn't uniform. Some towers are round, others square. Round ones are newer and smarter, more resistant to siege engines, since they deflect force better and have no corners to collapse. Square towers? Easier to build, but notoriously vulnerable at the corners. Your castle has a mix of both, likely the result of multiple generations of panic-driven renovations. You've learned not to get attached to the architecture. It's always changing. You take a moment to warm your hands over the small brazier set near the wall. It's technically against regulations. Open flames in a tower are a risk. But everyone does it, especially in winter. The tower gets brutally cold, and if your fingers freeze, you're not going to be hitting anything with a bow. One time, a young squire tried to light a bigger fire and ended up setting part of the roof on fire. You helped put it out. You also helped mock him for the next 3 months. Then there's the signal system. Each tower has flags and a horn, and if something serious happens, enemy sighted, wall breach, dramatic goat stampede, you sound the alarm. The horn's a heavy brass thing that takes lung power and emotional commitment. The sound it makes is not elegant. More like a dying cow, but it gets the point across. Once it echoes across the valley, every man in the castle grabs their gear and runs to their assigned post. You've heard that horn twice in your life. Once during the winter skirmish. The other, well, you try not to think about it. That one didn't go so well. As the day drags on, a raven lands on the edge of the tower beside you. It stares at you, blinking, then lets out a loud, mocking caw. You throw a pebble at it. It doesn't flinch, just glares. You've heard old stories that ravens are messengers for the dead, omens, or spies depending on who you ask. One grizzled guard swears a raven once flew back and forth between enemy camps during a siege. Probably coincidence. Probably. A sudden gust of wind makes you grab the tower wall for balance. It's stronger up here. Merciless, really. You wonder what it would be like to climb this tower during a storm. You've heard of defenders doing just that during battle, shielding torches from the rain to signal allies in the distance. Madmen, really. Or heroes. Same thing, often enough. Eventually your shift ends. You nod to your replacement, who looks half frozen already, and start the descent. Every step echoes, spiralling you downward, and the tower creaks and groans as the wind pushes against it. You try not to think about the age of the stones, or the weight of them. Back on solid ground, the courtyard feels strangely loud after the hush of the tower. You stretch your arms, crack your neck, and look up one last time. The tower rises above you, silent and eternal, a sentinel of cold stone and narrowed eyes. You feel safer knowing it's there, and also a little nervous, because towers don't just protect, they watch. The wind has shifted. There's a different feel to the air this morning, tense, expectant. Even the birds seem quieter, as if they're waiting for something to happen. You move through the gatehouse with your morning routine ticking along like clockwork. Check the weapons rack, curse the breakfast porridge, scan the road for anyone dumb enough to show up uninvited. But today, your task is a little different. Today, you're on drawbridge duty. Now, on paper, operating a drawbridge seems like one of those jobs you give to the guy who can't tell the difference between wheat and oats. But in reality, it's a high-stress mechanical gamble involving chains the width of your thigh, gears that groan louder than your uncle after dinner, and a very real possibility of squashing someone flat if you get the timing wrong. It's also one of the castle's most important defensive features, and weirdly one of the most underrated. You approach the small stone chamber tucked into the side of the gatehouse. Inside is the heart of the drawbridge mechanism, a mess of iron, oak beams, winches, and massive counterweights. It smells like sweat, old wood, and rust. A pair of thick ropes hang down from the ceiling, part of the pulley system that controls the bridge's rise and fall. You run your fingers along one of the ropes. It's coarse, frayed in places, but strong. It has to be. One snap during an emergency, and the whole thing collapses like a drunk at a wedding. The drawbridge itself is made of heavy timbers banded with iron, reinforced to resist fire, axes, and the occasional overconfident battering ram. It spans the moat like a wooden tongue, leading from the road to the outer gate. When raised, it becomes a vertical barrier, nearly impossible to climb, especially when it's dripping with rain or iced over in winter. When lowered, it's a lifeline, a choice, an invitation if you're feeling generous, or a trap if you're feeling creative. Your job this morning is to test it, just routine maintenance. You and 2 other guards begin the process, turning the massive crank that winds the chains and lifts the bridge. It rises slowly, creaking with effort, until it locks into place with a deep, bone-shaking thunk. The counterweights clunk into their resting position inside the walls, and the chains settle with a satisfied rattle. You stand back, sweating slightly despite the cold. Always feels like you're performing surgery with a hammer. You test the release lever next. One wrong move here and the bridge drops like a guillotine. But with a practiced jerk of the lever and a bit of shouting to clear the area, the bridge lowers back down, thudding into the ground with a satisfying solid whomp. No squeals, no snapping ropes, no unexpected dips into the moat. Success. Drawbridges aren't universal, by the way. Not every castle had one. Some just had fixed bridges, or none at all, relying on narrow causeways or simply trusting the terrain. But a well-made drawbridge adds that extra layer of control. You can let someone in or shut them out in seconds. You can fake a retreat, lure invaders across, then drop the bridge behind them and turn the gatehouse into a death trap. One lord famously used his drawbridge to trick an enemy envoy, inviting them in, slamming the bridge shut and ransoming them for gold and 3 barrels of wine. Tactical and profitable. But here's the fringe fact of the day. Some castles had double drawbridges. One over the moat, another inside the gate passage. Why? Paranoia. Or brilliance, depending on how many relatives you had poisoned recently. It meant even if attackers got past the first bridge and somehow breached the portcullis, they'd hit another drop, and another opportunity for defenders to separate them from their limbs using arrows, boiling water, or gravity. You respect that level of strategic pettiness. You step outside to check the bridge alignment and watch as the carpenters finish replacing a warped plank near the centre. The lead carpenter, a grizzled woman with a hammer the size of your head, mutters something about the wood swelling again, and you nod solemnly like you understand timber dynamics. You don't. But she scares you. The rest of the castle hums in the background, guards shifting through drills, a dog barking at a chicken that's absolutely done with everyone's nonsense, and somewhere, someone is attempting to sing. Badly. But you keep your eyes on the bridge. The road beyond it winds down into the valley like a lazy river, flanked by trees that look harmless, until you remember that forests make excellent cover for enemy scouts. One of the scouts returns near midday, mud up to his knees and a look in his eyes you don't like. He crosses the drawbridge quickly and disappears into the keep to report. You don't hear what he says, but the effect is immediate. The Lord's men start moving faster. Armour gets strapped on. Flags go up. Someone yells for oil to be heated. You glance down at the bridge again and suddenly you're aware of how important this chunk of wood really is. Because when trouble comes, and it always does, it's this bridge that decides who comes in and who stays out. You post yourself near the control room just in case. The orders haven't come yet, but you feel it in your gut. Soon, someone will shout the signal, and you'll haul that bridge up like the mouth of the castle slamming shut. The moat will be your front line, the drawbridge, your shield. But there's another possibility, one no one wants to talk about. What if the mechanism jams? What if the ropes snap under strain? There's a story, one whispered among the older guards, about a castle where the drawbridge failed to lift in time. The enemy stormed the gate. The defenders lost everything. It was later discovered that the mechanism had been sabotaged. Cut ropes hidden beneath replaced boards. The traitor was never found. That thought sticks with you as you inspect the pulley housing again. You check the tension. Look for frays. Tap the iron casing, listening for anything that sounds off. Everything seems normal. But now, paranoia whispers in the back of your mind. Still, when dusk falls and the sky turns orange behind the trees, you stand by the drawbridge with your hands resting on the chain crank and your eyes locked on the road. Behind you, the castle waits. Above you, the towers and walls loom like sentinels of stone, and in front of you the wooden bridge stretches out like an open hand, ready to welcome or to close into a fist. You're on patrol again, lucky you, with a torch in one hand and a slowly numbing sense of curiosity in the other. It's late, and most of the castle is asleep, save for the kitchens, still arguing about salt, and a few guards stationed along the walls. You walk slowly, listening to the familiar creaks and groans of the stone around you. But tonight, your route takes you somewhere spicier. You're heading straight into the belly of the beast. The murder holes. No, really, that's what they're called. Tucked into ceilings above gates, passageways, stairwells, and anywhere else someone might decide to charge through without knocking. Murder holes are medieval architecture's answer to the question, how can we make walking indoors more dangerous than being outside during a storm with a sword stuck in your leg? You duck through a narrow archway inside the gate passage, torch flickering in the damp air, and enter the long, vaulted corridor between the outer and inner gates. High above your head are the holes, dark, round, and unsettlingly silent. Some are no wider than your fist, others could easily fit a human skull. You try not to think about the fact that, historically, some of them may have done exactly that. Murder holes weren't there for decoration. During a siege, if attackers broke through the first gate or forced their way into the passage, they'd find themselves trapped in this narrow gauntlet with angry defenders above, and what came next depended on just how creative, or petty, your castle's garrison felt that day. Rocks, a classic. Bricks, effective. Boiling water, surprisingly popular. Boiling oil, not so much. Oil was expensive and valuable. Wasting it on invaders was like setting your paycheck on fire just to make a point. What did get used more often was heated sand. Think about it. A bucket of fine, dry sand, roasted until it's hot enough to cook bread, poured through a hole onto a soldier wearing metal armour. That stuff gets everywhere, into joints, under helmets, inside gloves. You scream, you flail, you fall, if you're lucky. You reach the murder hole chamber, a small room positioned directly above the gate passage, and set your torch in a wall sconce. It's cramped, with a low ceiling and slanted floor, designed so that anything you pour through the holes naturally slides down and out. There are buckets stacked against one wall, empty now, but marked for different uses. One has a faint label, water, not drinking. You don't ask. There's a wooden lever beside one of the holes rigged to drop a plank and unleash whatever's behind it. The trap has been deactivated, but you can see the old charring on the stone where something flammable was once poured through. One of the veterans told you they once used a mix of pitch and tar during a skirmish. The smell alone cleared the passage faster than a full assault. You kneel by one of the holes and peer through it. Below, the corridor is empty, quiet, cold, but you imagine it filled with armoured soldiers, pressing forward, trapped between the raised portcullises. You picture them trying to lift shields overhead while hot liquids or burning pitch come cascading down like a divine punishment. This room, this simple chamber above the gate, becomes the ultimate equalizer. Gravity turned into a weapon. Not all murder holes are this straightforward, though. Some castles had them in private halls, just in case a guest got too bold. Others placed them over stairwells, especially the ones that spiraled upward. That way, if you're defending from above, you can rain death down while staying safe behind the curve. One castle, famous in the north, was said to have disguised its murder holes behind carvings of angels. So when the attack came, defenders dumped beehives through the mouths of cherubs. You heard that in the barracks. You're still not sure if it was a joke. Another strange tidbit. In some places, murder holes were psychological tools. They'd stay empty during an assault. No rocks, no fire, no sand. Just the threat. Imagine hearing the footsteps above, the scrape of something being dragged, the whisper of wind through the gaps, and then nothing. The invaders would wait, flinch, hesitate. And that hesitation? That was often all the defenders needed to regroup. You've always wondered who came up with the idea of the murder hole. Some paranoid architect with a talent for passive aggression, probably. Or maybe a defender with too much time and a strong dislike for stairs. Either way, they became standard in most major castles by the 13th century, especially in areas frequently hit by raids. They required little maintenance, minimal manpower, and, when used correctly, could turn the tide of an assault in moments. Still, there are debates. Some scholars argue that murder holes were more symbolic than practical. They say many were too small or awkwardly placed to be effective in real combat. Others counter that their mere presence made attackers cautious, slowing their advance, buying time for defenders. Who's right? Honestly, you're not sure. But after spending 10 minutes in this cramped little death box, you know one thing. You wouldn't want to be on the receiving end. You clean the chamber a bit, dust off the buckets, check for leaks. Last winter, melting snow pooled in one of the holes and nearly froze solid. Imagine pouring a slush puppy onto an invader's helmet. Less deadly, more insulting. Maybe that's the point. Eventually your patrol continues. You take one last look down through the largest opening. It's just a shadow now, a circle of cold stone and potential doom. You think about what it represents. Not just defense, but imagination. In a world where survival depended on stone and steel, someone looked at a ceiling and thought, what if we weaponized gravity? And honestly, you respect that. As you walk away, the torchlight flickering on the walls, you catch sight of a small carving near the entrance of the chamber. It's worn, almost invisible now, but it's there. A face, round, smiling, tongue out. Same style as the one in the tower. Probably the same bored mason with a wicked sense of humour. It's the last thing an invader would see before something horrible came raining down from above. A final insult from the castle itself. You're back on the wall again, perched above the countryside like some half-frozen gargoyle with a spear and too much time on your hands. The morning mist is thick today, clinging to the hills and winding around the castle like it's trying to get inside. You've got your hood pulled up, your boots damp, and your fingers just barely functional. But you're in position, and that means one thing. It's archer duty. You move toward your station, a narrow slit in the stone, angled inward like the eye of a needle. This, in the delightfully direct language of medieval defence, is called an arrow slit. Sometimes it's called an embrasure or a loophole, but around here everyone just calls it what it is. The place where you make someone else's day significantly worse from a safe distance. You step up to the slit and peer through it. The design is deceptively clever. From the outside it looks like a thin vertical crack, barely wide enough to slide a dagger through. But from inside it flares outward, giving you a surprisingly wide field of view and just enough room to angle your bow or crossbow left and right. Attackers trying to shoot in will struggle to even see you. Meanwhile, you're tucked away in the shadows with a quiver full of sharp opinions. Every archer in the castle learns to love these slits. You get good at finding the best position, shifting just enough to get a clear line of fire without exposing too much of yourself. The more you practice, the faster you get. Knock, draw, loose, knock, draw, loose. Your rhythm becomes its own kind of music, if music included the occasional scream and heavy thud in the dirt below. During peacetime, the arrow slits are just another part of the wall, gathering dust, collecting spiderwebs, and offering a nice breeze when the sun hits just right. But when things get tense, when the lookout starts squinting at the tree line or the captain starts assigning night shifts with no explanation, these slits become sacred spaces, silent, watchful, waiting. You shift your weight and rest your hand against the stone. It's cold, rough, worn smooth in places where generations of archers like you leaned in with bowed heads and itchy fingers. You imagine them, long dead, nameless, but still part of the rhythm of the place. Someone stood here before you. Someone will stand here after, hopefully with better boots. Arrow slits aren't random. They're placed with care, positioned to cover every approach to the castle. They're especially dense around gates, corners and courtyards, where attackers are likely to bunch up, and they're staggered at different heights, some low for kneeling shots, others higher for standing volleys. It's all about creating overlapping fields of fire, giving the castle's defenders the advantage of angles. You might not have superior numbers, but you've got geometry. You duck your head and take a seat on a wooden stool tucked behind the slit. From here, the outside world is reduced to a single, narrow frame. You see part of the road, the edge of the moat, a sliver of forest. You hear birdsong, muffled and distant. You feel the stillness, but it won't last. You remember the last time this slit saw real use. Years ago, during a skirmish with a band of mercenaries who underestimated how annoyed a castle garrison can get after 2 weeks of rain and bad stew. You stood right here, your heart pounding, watching them creep forward under cover of night. They tried to rush the outer gate in silence, thinking the fog would hide them. It didn't. You picked off 2 before they even knew what was happening. One fell into the moat, the other crawled away screaming. You still remember the way his helmet rolled down the hill. One of the more obscure bits of trivia you've picked up from the castle's master-at-arms is that arrow slit design varied wildly between cultures and time periods. Some were just vertical slits. Others had cross shapes allowing vertical and horizontal aiming. Some were curved or angled or even disguised. In certain castles the slits were built into statues, arrow fire from a stone saint, the ultimate divine insult. But of course, not everyone loves arrow slits. Some historians argue they were overrated, that in full-scale sieges they didn't make as big a difference as people like to imagine. Visibility was limited, aim was tricky, and attackers could eventually learn the patterns. That's not wrong. You've seen cocky archers lean too far out, only to catch an arrow in the eye. But here's the thing, it's not about perfection, it's about balance. Enough of these slits, well placed and well used, can break the back of an assault. You shift your position, stretch your legs, and try not to think about how much your back hurts. The hours crawl by. You watch clouds drift, the trees sway, and distant birds circle like lazy vultures. Just as your mind starts to wander, you hear it. A distant rustle. Not wind, not birds. Something moving through brush. You tense up, lean into the slit and scan the horizon. There. A shadow moves between trees. You can't make out details, but it's not alone. A second figure appears, then a third, then more. It's not an attack. Not yet. But it's a scout party, no question. You've seen enough patrols to recognise the body language. They're testing your response, mapping your walls, counting your towers. You signal the guard on the next tower over, who sounds a low warning bell. The castle starts to stir. You stay at your slit. You don't blink. You don't move. Later, when the sun sets and the scouts are long gone, the captain calls for readiness. The archers are assigned their posts. The arrow slits are cleaned, weapons distributed. You refill your quiver and settle back into your station. You feel the calm tension in your chest, that strange mix of fear and purpose. You're not just a man in a hole with a bow. You're part of something larger, one eye in a wall full of eyes. The night deepens, the mist returns, and you wait. You wait with your cheek against the cold stone and your fingers wrapped around the familiar curve of your bow. Because when the time comes, when the shouting starts and the ladders rise, it'll be through this narrow slice of world that you remind the invaders. This castle bites back. The signal comes just before dawn, when the sky is still caught in that half-light between night and morning. A pale, shivering grey that makes everything feel distant and not entirely real. One of the towers sounds a single sharp blast from the horn. Not the full siege alarm, just a warning. But that's enough to set everything into motion. You're already moving before the second echo fades. You grab your kit and head straight to the wall, passing other guards who are doing the same. No one speaks. There's a strange calm that takes over in moments like this. A kind of quiet, practiced panic. Every boot knows where it's supposed to go. Every weapon knows the hand it belongs in. You've drilled this scenario dozens of times, but drills never come with the smell. That metallic edge in the air. The smoke. The distant rhythmic thud of siege equipment rolling toward you. You reach your station at the eastern curtain wall just in time to see the first hint of movement beyond the tree line. Figures in armour, shields glinting faintly, then more, rows, lines, banners, siege ladders stacked in carts. There's no mistaking it. This isn't a skirmish or a show of force. This is the real thing, a full siege. The captain appears beside you barking orders. Archers to the wall, spearmen to the courtyard, oil to be heated. He checks the visibility, spits in the dirt and mutters something about how it's always a cloudy bloody Tuesday. Then he vanishes into the chaos, leaving you and your squad staring out at the swelling tide of enemies lining up outside your gates. Sieges are not glamorous. They're long, they're slow, they are the most uncomfortable, soul-draining, bladder-torturing kind of waiting game there is. From the moment you spot the enemy to the first real attack, hours, sometimes days, can crawl by. But that doesn't mean nothing's happening, because the moment a siege begins, your entire world shrinks to a list of priorities: food, water, fire, morale, and defence. The drawbridge is raised, the portcullis is locked, guards double-check that no one left the postern gate open because that's how castles fall, and reputations get ruined. The outer walls are manned with archers and crossbowmen, their quivers full and their expressions hard. Below, the kitchens are already rationing food. The well is being guarded like it holds gold, and someone, somewhere, is already counting how long you can last if help doesn't come. You're stationed on the wall above the main gatehouse. From here, you have a front row seat to the enemy's preparations. Siege towers are being constructed from pre-cut timber. Ladders are laid out in rows, each one a little too long for comfort. You spot what might be a trebuchet being assembled near the tree line. It's far enough off for now, but once it's functional, things are going to get a lot more exciting. And by exciting, you mean terrifying. You're also keeping an eye out for sappers. Siege engineers often try to undermine walls, literally, dig tunnels beneath the curtain wall, fill them with flammable material, and then set the whole thing on fire. If the burn is right, the wall collapses. It's slow work, risky, and loud. But it works. Your castle has been reinforced against such tactics, with deep stone foundations and a moat too soggy for reliable tunnelling. Still, you're listening. The first assault comes not long after midday. It starts with a wave of arrows, mostly inaccurate, but noisy. Then the first group charges. It's not a full assault, just a test. They rush the gate, carrying ladders, shouting battle cries that are more for themselves than for you. From your position, you can hear the shuffle of their boots, the clang of their shields, the way they hesitate when the first arrows slice down from your archers. Your bow is in your hands before you realise it. You draw, aim, loose. Again. Again. You're not even thinking, just reacting. The noise rises like a storm. Yells, whistles, the thunk of arrows hitting wood or armour or worse. You see one of the enemy soldiers raise a ladder and start to climb. You aim for the third rung. He falls, taking the ladder with him. You don't cheer, you just knock the next arrow. The attackers don't break through. Not yet. They fall back, dragging the wounded, leaving a few behind. It's messy, ugly, fast, and then it's over, for now. The captain walks the line, checking faces. You count arrows. You try not to think about the man who screamed the longest. There's already a blood stain on the stones beneath your feet. No one cleans it. You head down to the courtyard to eat, but your appetite is gone. The stew tastes like regret, and the bread could break a tooth. You eat anyway. You have to. You hear someone joking about how the enemy's banner looks like a dead chicken, and you laugh. Too loudly, too fast. That's what stress sounds like. Later, as the sun begins to dip and the sky turns the colour of rusted iron, the enemy starts to build. You can see them erecting their siege towers. Tall, hideous wooden things that roll on wheels and carry death inside. One is already half finished. They'll be back tomorrow. Stronger, smarter. That night you can't sleep. You lie in your bunk and stare at the ceiling, counting the cracks in the stone and listening to the muffled conversations drifting through the hall. You hear someone sobbing quietly. You hear someone praying. You consider both and do neither. Instead, you sit up, pull your boots back on, and return to the wall. The world outside is quiet again. The enemy camp glows with small fires. You watch, wondering who's awake out there, who's watching you, who's waiting for their orders. This is the beginning. The siege has truly started, and your castle, old and cold and impossibly stubborn, is ready. Dawn breaks over the horizon like a bruised eye opening. red, swollen and promising pain. You're already up, armour half fastened, hair sticking to your forehead, and hands still stained from the night before. There wasn't a second wave during the dark hours, just watching, listening, trying not to fall asleep on your feet, while the torches burned low and everyone tried not to think about how bad it was going to get. But now the sun's rising, and with it comes the next phase of the siege, escalation. You can feel it in your bones. Something is about to happen, and then, like clockwork, it begins. A series of sharp staccato clangs rings out from the enemy camp. At first, you think it's just hammering, more siege towers going up. But then you hear the heavier sounds, the wheeze of ropes tightening, the creak of wood under pressure, the kind of groan a machine makes right before it does something incredibly rude to a wall. You squint into the early light and see it. The trebuchet, well, not just one, 3 of them, rising above the enemy camp like skeletal giants. They're still being adjusted, but soon they'll be loaded with rocks the size of pigs. Or actual pigs, if they're feeling creative. You've heard stories of diseased carcasses being flung over walls as a form of biological warfare. Charming. But right now, the main concern is stone. Big, heavy, relationship-ending stone. You head down to the bailey to help prepare for the bombardment. The masons are already reinforcing key sections of the wall with timber bracing and sandbags. Buckets of water are lined up in case of fire. The apothecary's assistant, whose main talent seems to be looking constantly nauseated, is mixing something that smells like vinegar and despair. Everyone has a job. The captain briefs the troops. His voice is flat, measured, like someone who's done this too many times to bother sounding inspirational anymore. "We hold," he says. "We mend what they break. We fire when ordered. Stay behind cover, and for the love of the saints, don't try to catch anything." You return to the wall just as the first projectile sails over the treetops. It's surreal, watching it arc lazily through the air, spinning gently, as if it's just a curious rock out for a stroll. And then it hits. The impact shakes the entire wall. Dust bursts upward. A section of the outer rampart cracks but holds. You feel the vibration in your legs, in your teeth. You blink the grit from your eyes and brace for the next one. And it comes, faster this time. A second stone slams into the outer courtyard, crushing a supply cart and turning it into kindling. A third misses entirely and lands in the moat with a dull splash, and an even duller thwomp as the muck absorbs the force. The enemy doesn't pause. More stones fly. One clips the top of a tower, shearing off part of the battlement. You can hear someone screaming up there, though whether it's from pain or adrenaline is anyone's guess. The defenders stay low, crouched behind crenellations, counting the rhythm between each shot. Fire, reload, fire again. It's like a song from hell. You're assigned to the lower wall, helping move supplies and assisting the wounded. You carry a man whose leg is bent in a direction that legs shouldn't go. You hand out water. You help patch up cracks with whatever you can find, plaster, timber, prayer. The old chaplain even shows up, muttering blessings in a shaky voice that doesn't exactly inspire confidence. Still, it helps, sort of. Midday comes, and the sky turns a dull silver. The enemy switches tactics. Instead of just boulders, they start launching payloads wrapped in cloth and soaked in pitch. Firebombs. One hits the roof of a stable, and within minutes smoke is pouring into the sky. Bucket chains form instantly. You join in, tossing water until your arms feel like they're going to fall off. Eventually the fire's out, but half the grain stored there is ruined. That won't matter yet, but it will. A siege isn't just about walls, it's about time. By afternoon, the trebuchets go silent. Not because they've run out of rocks. No, that would be too easy. They're just giving you a full sense of security. You know it. Everyone knows it. The silence is worse than the bombardment. You sit against the wall, drinking lukewarm water, listening to the crackle of fires still smouldering, and the quiet weeping of a servant girl who was nearly crushed when the bakery roof collapsed. Someone tries to lighten the mood by pointing out that at least they didn't launch plague victims. Yet, another guard mutters, because yes, that is a thing that happened. In some sieges, especially during outbreaks, attackers would catapult the dead over the walls, corpses riddled with disease, not just to kill with trauma, but to contaminate everything: food, water, air. You'd laugh. But it's hard when you're thinking about how fast dysentery spreads in cramped quarters. You climb to the tower near the gatehouse for a better look. From there you see the trebuchets being reloaded with something large, but not stone, something wrapped, something suspiciously bovine-shaped. The captain sees it too. He mutters a curse and calls for the apothecary. There's a chance it's just meant to scare you. But if it's a diseased animal, and it lands near your water source, you don't want to think about that. There's a small scholarly debate about whether the biological weapons of the medieval world were actually effective or just grotesque theatre. Some historians argue that disease was just as likely to spread within the attacking army due to poor hygiene and open latrines. Others believe these tactics had a major psychological impact, shattering morale, terrifying the defenders into surrendering rather than risk infection. And honestly, you can see both sides. You'd rather not get brained by a cow full of smallpox, thanks. Evening falls and the trebuchets are silent again. For now, you're exhausted, covered in soot, and your arms feel like they've been through a windmill. But the wall still stands, the castle still holds. The enemy might have better toys, but you have something they don't. The home advantage. You know every inch of this place, every crack in the stone, every path, every blind spot, every trick. And most importantly, you have time. Time to endure, time to wait them out. You settle in against the battlement, watching the firelight flicker on the far hill. Let them come, let them throw everything they have. You've got a few surprises left too. The first thing you hear in the dark is the drums. Not music. No, nothing that comforting. These are low, deliberate thuds rolling across the valley like distant thunder. You sit up in your bunk, groggy, still wrapped in a blanket that smells like old sweat and damp wool, and for a moment you're not sure if you're dreaming. Then another beat comes, slower this time, followed by a series of sharp cracks, whip-like sounds. You swing your legs off the bed and plant your feet on the cold floor. It's not a dream, it's a message. You step outside and the castle is already stirring. Sleepy-eyed soldiers tighten straps and check weapons. Archers shuffle into position. No alarms have sounded, no horns blown. But everyone hears the same thing. That steady, pulsing rhythm carried on the early morning fog. It's psychological warfare, one of the oldest, strangest, and most human parts of siegecraft. The enemy's not attacking yet. Not physically. But they're not exactly being subtle either. They want you to feel it, to hear it, to imagine what's coming next. A good commander knows that a battle begins long before the swords come out. It starts in your head. You climb the nearest tower for a better look. In the valley below, enemy banners flap gently in the breeze. Their soldiers mill around, appearing relaxed. Too relaxed. The drums are coming from the tree line, where you can just make out the dark silhouettes of percussionists standing in a wide arc. They're spaced evenly, hands moving in unison, pounding out that slow heartbeat of dread. No battle cries, no signals, just rhythm, relentless, measured. It gets under your skin. You glance at the men beside you. One is clutching a rosary. Another just mutters, "Not again," under his breath. You've heard stories from older veterans about this. Armies who marched into war with musicians leading the way. It wasn't just to boost morale for their own side. It was to wear down the enemy. You start imagining the worst. Your ears start picking up sounds that might not even be real. Was that a horn? A scream? A whisper? The captain arrives shortly after, his face like stone. He says nothing about the drums, just reminds you all to stay sharp. Don't let your mind wander. They want fear, he says. Don't give it to them. But of course you do. You remember tales of other sieges, some real, some probably exaggerated beyond recognition, where the attackers used all kinds of tricks to rattle defenders. Nighttime chanting, mocking songs, banners soaked in blood and displayed upside down, messages tied to arrows and shot over the walls. One particularly creative warlord once catapulted decapitated heads into a castle courtyard, each one with a note stuffed in its mouth. "Surrender now, or join us," it said. The defenders didn't surrender. They did vomit, though. Here, it's more subtle. As night falls again, the enemy camp comes to life in strange ways. Fires burn a little brighter. Shadows move a little too quickly. At one point, you swear you see a figure in a white robe standing on a hill, arms raised to the sky. Some kind of ritual? A priest? A very dramatic cook? No one knows. And then the voices start. It begins with laughter. Low and cruel, carried on the wind, it drifts into the castle like smoke, sour and persistent. Then come the shouts. Nonsense mostly. Words you don't recognize. Mocking chants. A man screams a name over and over, someone you've never heard of. Or maybe you have. Maybe it's one of your own. The ambiguity is the point. Sleep becomes harder to find. Even when you try, the sounds follow you. You dream of faceless soldiers climbing the walls in silence, of hands reaching through arrow slits, of drums beating inside your own chest. Some guards snap. A young lad throws his helmet into the courtyard and starts shouting back at the enemy. He's pulled away before he does something truly stupid. And then comes the newest trick, arrows. Not in volleys, just single shafts launched high into the air, barely audible until they thunk into the ground or a rooftop. Each one carries a message. Some are rolled scrolls, others are just parchment scraps pinned with bits of twine. You find one near your post, fluttering in the breeze, the arrow buried in the mud. You pluck the paper off and read the words scrawled in rough ink. Your lord is already negotiating. You're dying for nothing. It's not true, probably, but it doesn't have to be. All it has to do is plant a seed. Some of the messages are more graphic. Descriptions of what happened to castles that resisted. Promises of mercy, if you open the gate before sunrise. Even drawings. Crude, terrifying sketches of what they'll do to you if you don't surrender. You keep those ones out of the reach of the younger recruits. The captain orders the arrows collected and burned. Don't read them, he says. They're poison. But everyone reads them. Everyone wants to know what the enemy thinks of you. Everyone wants to know if they're bluffing, or if they know something you don't. By now, the mood inside the walls has shifted. You still hold the high ground, the thick walls, the strategic advantage. But something intangible has changed. It's in the way people glance at each other, in the silence at the evening meal, in the fact that no one is laughing anymore, not even the cook, who once made jokes about rats being just crunchy bacon. You start to understand why psychological warfare was such a powerful tool. It's invisible, it's cheap, and it multiplies itself. One doubt breeds two become a whisper, and whispers spread faster than fire. But this castle, it's been through worse. You know it. You can feel it in the stones beneath your feet. The walls aren't just tall, they're stubborn. They've outlived warlords, kings, and plagues, and they've heard every threat, every trick, every taunt before. Still, that night, as you stand on the wall, watching enemy fires dance below and listening to the drum start up again, you find yourself whispering something under your breath. Not a prayer exactly, just a simple promise you'll have to do better than that. You wake to the ground trembling beneath you. Just a subtle shift at first, like the castle itself is rolling in its sleep, but it grows stronger, more deliberate. Dust sifts down from the ceiling. Somewhere across the courtyard something heavy falls with a loud crash. You don't even bother grabbing your boots. You're already moving, instinct taking over. This is it. Catapults. The trebuchets might be the celebrities of medieval siege warfare. Big, dramatic, full of elegance and long arcs. But catapults are the blunt instrument. The hammer to the trebuchet's scalpel. They don't toss projectiles in graceful arcs from a mile away. They come in closer, firing low, fast and hard. They're designed not to impress, but to batter. As you scramble up to the wall walk, boots half-laced and armour bouncing against your ribs, the first projectile hits. This time it's not a boulder. It's a bundle, tightly wrapped in rope and packed with something that explodes into sharp, splintered chaos as it strikes the outer courtyard. Shrapnel, splinters, screaming. One of the younger guards behind you flinches so hard he drops his bow. No one says anything. Everyone's too busy getting into position. From your vantage point you can now see them clearly. The siege engines. They've been moved closer in the night, just past the range of your archers, behind crude wooden barricades. 4 of them, lined up like teeth. Big torsion-powered catapults, onagers technically, each one cranked and ready to hurl death at speed. Their twisted ropes creak as they're tensioned, the arms cocked back, ready to snap forward and ruin someone's entire week. The next shot comes almost immediately. This one is a solid block of stone smaller than a trebuchet's projectile, but moving with terrifying speed. It hits the outer wall and you feel it, like the castle is wincing. A thin crack appears near one of the battlements, and the captain growls something unintelligible and calls for bracing. You and 3 others scramble to reinforce the inner side of the wall. It's a frantic mess of timber beams, sacks of sand, and whatever else you can shove into place. The idea is to absorb the shock from the next hit, or at least stop the wall from collapsing inward. One of the beams doesn't quite fit. and a particularly creative soldier starts kicking it into place while cursing its parentage. Then comes the scream of another projectile, and this one doesn't hit the wall. It sails just over and crashes into the courtyard, striking the well cover and splintering it into pieces. Water erupts upward in a beautiful, terrible burst. You hear shouts from across the castle, guards running to check if the shaft itself was damaged. If the well is broken, you're in serious trouble. Wells are the castle's life during a siege. Without clean water, disease spreads like rumours at a wedding. You're ordered to inspect the damage. You sprint across the yard, ducking under another incoming missile that hits the roof of the granary and sends tiles flying. You reach the well. Miraculously, the shaft is intact, only the cover shattered. You breathe a shaky sigh of relief and shout back the news. The guards cheer weakly. Small victories. Catapults, you realise, don't just hit hard. They mess with your priorities. Every stone flung over the wall means someone has to make a choice. Patch the breach, care for the wounded, or chase the next fire. It's a slow, grinding war of attention. You return to the wall in time to catch sight of the enemy crew reloading. They're moving fast now, clearly confident. You narrow your eyes. It's about to get worse, because now come the diseased projectiles. The first one hits the courtyard near the stables and bursts open like a grotesque piñata. Inside, something that used to be a goat. It's bloated, greenish, and definitely not from this morning's butcher. The smell hits seconds later, thick and rotten. You gag and turn away, covering your mouth with your cloak. The guards scramble to remove it, carefully using hooked poles and gloves soaked in vinegar. It's dumped into a pit and set alight, smoke rising in thick, greasy curls. This is the enemy's latest play. Not to breach your walls, but to rot you out from the inside. Historians still argue whether biological warfare in the medieval world was a calculated strategy, or just a natural byproduct of desperation. But in this moment, you don't care about the academic debates. You care about the stink, the disease risk, and the way your stomach turns every time you see another bundle flying through the air. You work double shifts the rest of the day, helping reinforce the walls and brace exposed towers. The master mason shouts orders while casually dodging falling bricks, like he's done this 100 times. He probably has. The man once claimed he'd rebuilt this castle more times than he's shaved. Judging by his beard, you believe it. That night there's no sleep. Not because the attack continues. It doesn't. The catapults fall silent just after dusk, but because the silence is worse. Everyone lies awake, waiting for the next projectile, the next impact, but nothing comes. Just the echo of phantom creaks and the occasional coughing fit from someone who got too close to the goat. Somewhere around midnight you walk the walls. The stars are out. The enemy camp is quiet. You spot the silhouettes of their engines, still looming, still aimed your way. And you realise something strange. They didn't attack your weakest spot. They could have targeted the cracked southern tower or the still smouldering granary, but they didn't. It's almost like they're testing you, measuring, looking for patterns in your response. The thought sends a chill down your spine. It's not just brute force anymore. They're studying you. Back in the guard room, you sit down, peel off your gloves and try to scrub the stench from your hands with rough cloth and cold water. It doesn't help much. Someone hands you a bowl of stew. You take one bite and nearly gag. Not from the taste, but because the cook, bless his soul, thought this was a great time to experiment with new spices. No one laughs. Tomorrow will bring more fire, more stone, more sickness. But for tonight you eat in silence, staring at the wall, listening for the next tremor in the earth. Because now you know this isn't just a siege of the walls, it's a siege of the mind. By now the castle feels smaller, tighter, like the walls are leaning in just a little more than they did yesterday. It's not the structure, it's you, it's everyone. The tension, the fatigue, the slow unravelling of nerves like thread on a spool. What was once a proud, impenetrable fortress now creaks with exhaustion, and not just in the stones. Today begins with a surprise, not outside but inside. It starts with whispers, a missing food sack, a locked door found open, a trail of muddy footprints where no one should have been walking. Then the captain appears, half-dressed, face tight with rage, and summons the entire night watch into the yard. You're one of them. You stand in the cold, trying to blink the sleep from your eyes, and listen as he announces what everyone's already guessed. Someone's been stealing supplies. Now, in normal times, this wouldn't be a crisis. A few extra bites of salted meat, a swig of wine, maybe a handful of oats for someone's pet rat. You'd grumble, sure, but you'd move on. But in a siege, when every crumb counts, when the granaries are half burnt and the wells already being rationed, this becomes something more, something dangerous. Sabotage. The word isn't spoken out loud, but it hovers in the air like smoke, because it's not just the food that's gone missing. One of the archers swears his bowstring was cut and retied improperly. Another found nails missing from a barricade. A rope holding the portcullis counterweight was frayed, on purpose, they say. The captain begins his investigation immediately. No one is above suspicion. Guards are questioned, servants interrogated. Even the Lord Steward is asked to open his quarters. Nothing is found, but that only makes the paranoia worse. You catch glances that weren't there yesterday. Muted conversations that go quiet when you walk past. Trust begins to dissolve like salt in water. Then comes the worst part, the pantry key is missing. That's when everyone realizes this isn't some desperate guard sneaking extra rations. This is someone working from the inside, someone with access, with patience, with an agenda. The word traitor finally drops, heavy and terrible. Suddenly everything changes. The walls aren't just defending against enemies outside, they're trapping you in with one. Your routine becomes a little less automatic. You double-check every door, every rope, every latch. You start carrying your dagger everywhere, even when you sleep. So does everyone else. The barracks are quieter, meals are shorter, jokes stop halfway through and don't return. And then there's the fear. The kind that eats you slowly, not with fangs, but with silence. What if the traitor isn't just a thief? What if they're working with the enemy? Passing messages, sabotaging weapons, mapping blind spots. What if the reason the catapults didn't strike the cracked tower was because someone told them not to? You begin to think back. Every small mistake, every odd sound in the night, every supply that ran out too soon, they all take on new meaning now. Even the strange echo in the eastern hallway. Was that really just the wind? Some of the veterans dismiss it. There's always someone, they say, a rat among wolves. Just smoke 'em out. But you're not so sure. Whoever it is, they've been smart enough to avoid detection this long, and they know the castle, they know the rhythm, the routines. That afternoon you're assigned to patrol the inner keep, not the walls, not the gate, inside, where the secrets live. It's darker than it should be. Not because of lighting, there are torches enough, but because of how the hallways twist and choke the light. You pass through storage chambers, weapon caches, private prayer rooms. In one corridor you find a door slightly ajar that shouldn't be. You push it open with the edge of your spear and find nothing but a broom, a rusty pail, and a rolled-up rug that's been gnawed at one end. Still, you mark the door. The strangest thing is how quiet it gets when you're this deep inside. The sounds of the siege, the drums, the shouting, even the creak of the siege engines, fade until they're just background static. In here, it's just footsteps, breathing, thoughts. You find yourself staring at people differently now. The steward who never sweats, the archer who's always early, the cook's apprentice who knows too much about which larders are still full. You hate yourself for it, but you can't help it. Every glance becomes a suspicion. Every smile feels like a mask. Later that night, during a restless sleep on a cot that smells like damp wool and burnt onions, you're woken by a shout. "Thief!" You're up in seconds, dagger in hand, following the noise through a maze of corridors until you reach the chapel. One of the guards, red-faced and wheezing, points at a smashed box on the floor. Inside were candles, silver coins, and a scroll. The coins are gone. The scroll's still there, but the box has a symbol carved into its lid now. Fresh, a shape you don't recognize, something sharp and angular. You glance at the priest. He's pale. "It's not just a thief," he says quietly. "It's a message." The captain arrives soon after. He's calm, but his eyes are blazing. No one's allowed to sleep that night. Everyone is questioned again. You try to recall where everyone was, what you heard, what you saw. It all blurs. The walls feel closer than ever. In the days that follow, everything changes. Locks are reinforced. Keys are split between guards. Patrols double. Food is kept under armed watch. And morale drops like a stone in a pond. The enemy hasn't breached your gates, but they've still managed to crack something. Because now every creak is suspicious. Every gust of wind carries doubt. You look at the man beside you and wonder, not if he'll fight, but who he's fighting for. And that's the brilliance of internal sabotage. It doesn't need to succeed to work. It just needs to make you afraid of your own walls. There's a noise beneath your feet, a vibration, subtle and strange, like someone dragging a heavy trunk across the stones, except it's coming from below. At first, you think it's your imagination. After everything with the missing supplies and the traitor rumours, your brain's been chewing on shadows like a dog with a bone. But then it happens again. A low grinding sound. You're not imagining it. Others hear it too. You're standing near the base of the curtain wall, near a small alcove used for storage, a shadowy little pocket of the castle most people forget exists. And that's probably why the sound is coming from here. Somewhere beneath the stone floor something is moving. Or someone. That's when the word reaches you. Sappers. The alarm doesn't ring out like it does for a charge or a fire. No horns, no shouting, just quiet urgency. The captain appears beside you with a grim expression, and within moments he's dispatching a team of engineers to the base of the wall with shovels, picks, buckets, and a load of very nervous energy. You join the group. Undermining, a siege tactic as old as stone walls themselves, is when the attackers dig tunnels beneath your castle with the intent of collapsing entire sections of it. They dig, you fall. Simple. Terrifying. It's not fast and it's not glamorous. It's digging through earth in the dark under enemy fire, with the hope that the wall above will come crashing down if you time the burn right. You don't even want to imagine what happens if you miscalculate. But defending against a mine, that's its own nightmare. You follow the engineers down into the undercroft, a damp, low-ceilinged space below the inner yard. This is where they kept wine casks, extra timber, and that one cat everyone's pretty sure is immortal. Now it's where you listen to the heartbeat of the earth, and it's loud. The head engineer, a woman with calloused hands and a mouth like a saw, presses her ear to the wall and signals for silence. You all hold your breath. There it is, a faint scraping, rhythmic and deliberate. A tunnel, without question. She curses softly. They're close. Within minutes, you're digging your own countermine. You wouldn't believe how fast soldiers can learn to be miners when the wall they sleep under is about to fall on their heads. You're handed a pickaxe and start hacking through soil just beside the suspected tunnel path. The goal? Find it, breach it, collapse it, or fight whoever's down there. The air gets worse with every foot you dig. Stale, damp, filled with dust and the scent of panic. Torches burn low. Your shirt clings to your back. Someone jokes that they should have trained you all as moles. No one laughs. After 2 hours of digging, your spade hits something hollow. The engineer signals for quiet again, and you all press in, ears straining. The sound is louder now, muffled voices, the scrape of tools. The attackers are just on the other side of this wall of soil, maybe 10 feet, maybe less. You exchange glances with the soldier beside you. His face is grey with sweat. You keep digging, and then you break through. The soil gives way suddenly and cold air rushes in. The tunnel beyond is narrow, wooden supports holding up the ceiling. You can hear voices more clearly now, foreign, fast and alarmed. Your group hesitates for just a moment, then surges forward. Torches raised, weapons out. It's chaos. You don't know what you expected down there. Beasts maybe. Men covered in soot and rage, but they're just people, digging, tired, armed with picks and desperation. The moment you breach, the clash begins. There's no room to swing properly. It's all elbows, knives, fists, choking dust. You jab your spear, miss duck, then drive it upward into someone's shoulder. The tunnel shakes as bodies crash into supports. Someone screams for you to fall back. Too late. The tunnel collapses. You wake coughing, choking on dirt. You're lying on your back, pinned by a chunk of wood. It's pitch black. Someone's groaning nearby. You hear muffled shouts, the sound of shovels. After what feels like an hour, hands find you, drag you out into light, and you blink up into the faces of your fellow defenders, mud-covered, bleeding, alive. The tunnel has been destroyed, but not without cost. 3 of your own didn't make it. 1 is still missing, and you know, with a sinking feeling, that this won't be the last attempt. You learn later that this wasn't even the first tunnel. There had been others, smaller ones, now collapsed, meant to test your defences, gauge the depth of your foundations. They were probing like termites, looking for weaknesses. If the moat were dry, they might have already succeeded. The wet ground slows them, but not enough, not forever. There's a scholarly debate about just how successful mining really was in medieval sieges. Some historians argue it rarely worked, citing the labour, the risk of collapse and the time investment. Others say it was devastating when done correctly, citing castles brought down in a single night when defenders failed to notice the digging. But everyone agrees on one thing. Even the threat of sapping could turn a garrison inside out. After the collapse, countermining becomes your new reality. Teams rotate in and out, digging tunnels of their own, not just to find attackers, but to listen. You start sleeping lighter. Every creak sounds like a cave-in. You wake from dreams of walls falling and can still taste dirt in your mouth. The captain walks the perimeter that evening, staring at the places where the wall has started to buckle ever so slightly. The masons reinforce it again. More timber, more stone, more prayers. You overhear him mutter, "They're not climbing over anymore, they're coming under." That night, one of the old veterans lights a candle for the ones who didn't come back. He places it near the chapel, beside the broken box from the earlier sabotage incident. Someone's carved the symbol deeper. No one knows what it means. Or maybe they do. You stare down at the freshly reinforced floor and wonder, not just how far the enemy's willing to dig, but how far you'd go to stop them. The scent hits you first, an odd mix of mould, damp wood, and something just a little too sour to be anything good. You follow it through the narrow side corridor near the pantry, your stomach already bracing for disappointment, and there it is. The barrel of dried fish has turned. Again. The lid's slightly ajar, the inside slick with some iridescent slime that probably wasn't there yesterday. You sigh. Welcome to siege cuisine. No one really prepares you for what it means to eat under siege. You think it's just smaller portions, maybe thinner soup, but what it really means is compromise, on taste, on freshness, on whatever standards you once had for what qualifies as food. And if the siege drags on, as it is now, it's less about nourishment and more about strategy. Because what sits in your larder determines how long your castle survives. You make a note to report the fish barrel, though honestly the smell has probably already filed its own complaint. Then you head down to the main storage chamber, where the quartermaster is busy taking inventory by candlelight, muttering to himself in a language that might be math or just madness. The shelves are emptier than they were a week ago. Rows of sacks are dwindling. Barrels once full to the brim are now reduced to dusty bottoms. Bread stores have gone from loaves to crusts. You know what that means. It's almost porridge season. Meals during a siege are dictated by what doesn't rot, mould, or attract rats faster than you can kill them. That means salt-cured meats, hardtack, which, let's be honest, is just punishment in biscuit form, and grain, lots and lots of grain. Oats, barley, lentils if you're lucky. If you're not, you get what's called siege stew, a mystery broth that changes every day and never for the better. You sit down later that evening for your share. Thin broth, a wedge of dry bread, and something the cook insists is cheese. It's not. It's salt in a slightly more solid shape. You chew through it anyway because there's no alternative, and honestly you're too tired to care. The castle's cook is doing what he can with what he has. He was once a tavern chef in a port town, used to oysters and garlic and spiced sausages. Now he stirs watery porridge and keeps count of onions like they're gold coins. You catch a glimpse of him now and then, slumped over a pot, eyes bloodshot, muttering about how things used to have flavour. Poor guy. The irony of siege food is that even if you technically have enough, it doesn't feel like it. Because hunger's not just in the belly, it's in the mind. Everyone starts hoarding. People squirrel away scraps, chew slower, guard their plates like dragons sitting on hoards of mouldy barley. You've seen friendships strain over extra spoonfuls. You've seen someone fake a stomach bug just to skip a shift and sneak into the pantry. That someone is now banned from 3 kitchens. And then there are the livestock. At the start of the siege, you had chickens, dozens of them, roaming the yard like they owned the place. Pecking, clucking, sometimes terrifying the squires. A few even had names. Now, there's exactly 5 left, and they're being guarded like royalty. Not for eggs, those dried up days ago, but because if things get worse, they might be your last fresh meat. You try not to look at them too long. The cows are gone, the goats too. Some were eaten. Others were released, sacrificed to buy time, confusion and noise when the enemy first advanced. The pigs lasted the longest, until someone got clever and tried to ferment pig blood into a sauce. It worked, sort of. But now no one trusts Red Stew Day. There's a fringe fact you remember, told by an old soldier who swore he read it in a monk's journal. During a famous siege, a garrison ran out of food and started cooking leather. Belts, boots, gloves, boiled until soft, then served like noodles. Apparently it tasted like broth made from despair. You haven't reached that point yet. But you did catch one of the lads sniffing his glove a little too intently. More historically grounded sources talk about the storage methods used to stretch supplies: barrels of salted herring, tightly packed grain sealed in wax-lined jars, dried herbs to fight off the inevitable scurvy. Your castle has most of those things, but the salt barrels are almost gone, the herbs are wilted, and someone ate the last of the dried apples 2 nights ago and left the core in the corner like some kind of crime scene. Water is still good, for now. The well survived the enemy's last bombardment, but the bucket chains are starting to fray, and the rope groans with every pull. If it fails, getting water becomes a risk. Someone will have to climb down. You're trying not to think about who that will be. Despite the grim menu, there's an odd kind of creativity that emerges. One guard makes a game out of guessing what's in the stew. Another swears he can make a cake from crushed oats, rendered fat and salt. He can't. But you eat it anyway because it's warm. A few guards have started growing herbs in broken buckets on windowsills. Scraggly little things, but they smell like something other than mildew. Still, the hunger creeps in. Not just physically, but emotionally. You miss flavour. You miss choice. You dream of roast duck and buttered bread and wine that doesn't taste like old plums having an argument. One night you wake up from a dream where you were eating an apple, only to realise you'd been chewing the corner of your blanket. The quartermaster says supplies might last 2 more weeks. 3 if you stretch them. Maybe 4 if someone discovers a secret cellar full of cheese. Someone starts that rumour the next morning, and by noon 6 guards are combing the old catacombs with torches and optimism. They find rats, not cheese. One of them still swears the rats were guarding something. At dinner that night, someone sets a loaf of bread on the table and everyone stares at it like it's glowing. It's warm, fresh, probably made from the last of the decent flour. The cook slices it slowly, reverently, handing out tiny pieces as if performing a sacred ritual. You chew your bit slowly, savouring it like it's the first food you've ever tasted. And then you go back to your post, belly half full, stomach still grumbling, but your mind steadier than it was before. Because sometimes, in a siege, you don't just eat to survive. You eat to remember that you're still human. The next day begins not with bells or horns, but with an argument. Loud, heated, echoing off the stone like a storm trapped inside a teacup. You're halfway through dragging a broken bench back into place when you hear it. Voices shouting in the Lord's Solar, sharp and panicked, with the kind of tension that doesn't come from mere ego or bruised pride. This is something deeper, something worse. You drop the bench. They're arguing about reinforcements. Word has reached the castle that a neighbouring lord, someone supposedly loyal, someone whose banner once hung in this very hall, is delayed. Whether that means caught in weather, tied up in a skirmish, or simply choosing not to come at all depends on which guard you ask and how drunk they are when they answer. The only thing everyone agrees on, you're still on your own, and no one knows for how much longer. Sieges aren't won with swords and stones alone. They're won with time, and reinforcements are your stopwatch. Every day you hold out is a gamble. If help arrives in time, you survive. If not, you either surrender or become a cautionary tale told by bards who've never seen what a castle looks like after it starves from the inside out. You take your post along the north wall and scan the horizon for the 100th time. Nothing. No dust trail, no distant movement, no glint of armour in the morning sun, just the enemy camp, fat and settled now, as comfortable as a tick in the warm fold of your misery. Their siege towers still sit idle, covered in tarps, but they're not leaving. If anything, they've expanded. New tents, new banners, a second cook fire pit that's sending up lazy smoke curls like they're roasting boar and not your hopes. Someone behind you spits. If they're waiting us out, we should be counting down, not up. You say nothing. He's not wrong. Inside, morale is wearing thin. Rations are now being served by the captain himself, both to keep order and to cut down on discrepancies, which is a polite way of saying theft. Fights have started breaking out in the yard, not over women or cards or insults, but over bread. Actual bread. Someone tried to steal another man's crust yesterday and lost 2 teeth for the trouble. The priest has started saying morning prayers at every meal now. It's meant to comfort, but all it really does is remind you how often he asks for deliverance. And yet amid the misery, rumours bloom like mushrooms in a damp cellar. You hear one over lunch, from a squire who always claims to have connections. Reinforcements are 2 days away, maybe 3. Led by the Duke of Haranmere, or maybe the Baroness of Eastgrieve, depending on who's telling it. Cavalry, infantry, even archers with longbows as tall as men. You want to believe it. You almost do. But then you remember the last rumour. the one about the hidden food stash in the chapel crypt. Turned out it was just old bones and a rat who fought like he had legal ownership of the place. Still, hope is a kind of hunger too. In the afternoon, a rider approaches the gates. Alone. No banner, no armour, just a tattered cloak and a mouthful of dirt. He's barely conscious by the time he's dragged inside, and what he brings isn't food or medicine or orders. It's news. According to him, reinforcements are coming. A host from the west. Big one, days away. But the roads are blocked. By weather maybe, or bandits, or other armies with their own problems. They're coming, but they're not coming soon. The Lord gathers the captains and advisors. Doors close. Voices rise. Someone throws a cup against a wall. You hear it shatter and wonder if it's the last one. The decision is made by evening. Patrols are doubled. All messengers are to be sent in pairs from now on. No more lone riders, no more hoping for luck to find its way through the trees. Every arrow and bolt is counted. Every torch is rationed. You are officially digging in. And with that comes the worst part. Waiting. Waiting is the true siege. The kind that doesn't test your strength or your aim or how many weapons you can carry. Waiting tests your patience, your faith, your mind. It fills your head with what-ifs, with distant sounds you swear might be hoofbeats or just the wind. You spend long hours on the wall with your eyes locked on the hills. You start to imagine things. Movement in the brush, flash of armour between trees, a call, a horn, anything. Nothing comes. You speak to the old knight who's been through 3 sieges before this one. He tells you stories while polishing a sword so chipped it looks like it lost an argument with a millstone. They never come when you want them to, he says, but when they do, you better be ready to open the gates faster than your legs want to. Did you ever have to surrender, you ask? He shakes his head slowly. No, but I watched a friend who did. Gave up the keep. Enemy took it. Then hung him from the gate he opened. Sometimes survival's just slower defeat. You think about that long after he's gone. That night you lie in bed listening for sounds again. Not from outside this time, but from the hallway. The saboteur still hasn't been caught. Supplies are still going missing. Someone found a set of armour stuffed with straw yesterday, meant to fake a guard on post. You try not to wonder how many other shadows in the castle are illusions, but somewhere, beneath all the dread and doubt, a thought claws its way to the surface. If reinforcements do come, if help does arrive, will there be enough of the castle left to save? Not the stone, the people. You pull your blanket tighter, close your eyes, and try to believe in cavalry, in banners cresting the hill, in a horn blown for you this time, and if not, then at least in holding on long enough to see it fail in person. Morning breaks under an uneasy silence. No catapults, no arrows, not even the sound of drums, just wind. Still, restless, whispering through the arrow slits like it knows something you don't. You get up before the others, armour only half buckled, and step out into the yard. The sky is colourless, the ground damp from a drizzle that no one remembers happening. For a moment it's hard to tell whether this is peace, or a pause. Then you hear a laugh. Not inside the walls, out there. A single distant burst of laughter, high, shrill, almost joyful. And then another voice answers, not with words, but with a braying goat noise. You blink. Was that? You're not sure if you're still dreaming or if someone's finally snapped. You climb to the wall and look out. The enemy camp is strange. Tents still there. Fires still burning. But no formations, no patrols. Instead, you see figures dancing around one of the bonfires, capes flapping, helmets on backward, weapons being used as drums. One soldier is definitely wearing goat horns, and from the way he's prancing, probably nothing else. It's not a siege anymore, it's a performance. Psychological warfare again, mutters the guard beside you, or they're just losing it. You don't respond, because deep down you know, this is something else. This is a distraction. Moments later, the horn sounds from the western wall. 3 short blasts, the signal for an enemy breach attempt. You're already moving, boots slamming downstairs, shouting for the next shift to follow. By the time you reach the lower yard, chaos has blossomed like fire. The western postern gate, a small, rarely used side entrance, is under assault. Not from outside, but from inside. The traitor or traitors have struck. 2 guards lie unconscious near the gatehouse. One of the outer doors has been tampered with, its bolt sawed through, its hinges oiled. Someone on your side was preparing to let them in, but they weren't fast enough. A group of attackers, maybe 10 or 12, now push toward the yard dressed not in full armour but in scavenged pieces. Fast, mobile, silent until they're not. A covert squad meant to breach, sneak and open the gates for a full wave. They're already inside, and now it's your turn. You join the fray with barely a thought, blade drawn, crashing into a figure whose helm is a butchered mix of steel and antlers. You parry once, twice, then drive your elbow into his throat. He goes down. Someone else lunges at you from the side. Your shield takes the blow, but your shoulder rings from the impact. Screams rise from the lower yard. Torches are knocked over. The stables catch fire. Again. This time the goats scatter, but one of them charges straight into an invader, which would be funny if you weren't soaked in sweat and defending your life. You see the captain shouting orders from the stairwell, rallying soldiers who were caught off guard. Some of the defenders fight barefoot, half-dressed, weapons grabbed mid-breakfast, but they fight hard. This is your ground, your stone. You won't let them take it. Eventually the enemy begins to falter. They didn't expect this much resistance. A few break for the gate, but you intercept one and send him sprawling with a crack of your spear haft. Another tries to scale the stable roof, maybe to get a view or launch a signal, until a crossbow bolt knocks him clean off. He lands beside you, groaning. You leave him. Within minutes it's over, the yard is thick with smoke, bodies and breathless silence. The enemy squad is either dead, dying, or captured. But no one's celebrating, because now you know how bad it's gotten. The castle was breached from within. Someone let them in. Someone knew the schedules, the blind spots, the shifting of the watch. You're told the guards at the gate were drugged, their food spiced with something bitter, just enough to drop them into sleep before the attackers slipped through. It wasn't just sabotage anymore, it was coordination. Interrogations begin that night. The captured soldiers refuse to speak, even under the gentler methods. The captain doesn't want to resort to the less gentle ones. Yet. But he's running out of patience. So are you. You catch a glimpse of one of the prisoners. He's bruised, cut, silent. But his eyes aren't defiant. They're expectant, like he still thinks he'll be rescued, or avenged. And that's when it hits you. This was a test run, a dry run for something bigger. They were probing again, this time not just the walls but your people, your reactions, your weak points. The next day is a mess of repairs, patrol shifts and tightened security. The postern gate is bricked up entirely. No more chances. Guards are rotated randomly now, and every soldier is paired with someone else, a buddy system of paranoia. But the damage isn't just physical. Trust has crumbled. Soldiers now eye each other with suspicion. You overhear one accusing his bunkmate of slipping something into his wine. Another demands to see his partner's patrol schedule, its madness slowly blooming from the edges inward. The captain tries to calm things. He speaks to the garrison at evening muster, reminding everyone that unity is the only path to survival. He says what he must. He does his job, but his eyes are darker than before, his voice thinner. He's tired, and no one claps. Later, as you clean your blade beside the well, you hear the strangest sound. Laughter. The goat-horned man again, maybe. Or one of the defenders finally snapping. Either way, it echoes too long. You stare at the gatehouse and feel the weight of it all pressing down like a second wall behind your ribs. They didn't break through, but they cracked you. And now, when the final push comes, and you know it will, somewhere inside someone might open the door. You wake up coughing. Not the dry, scratchy kind you can ignore, but the deep, chest-shaking sort that rattles your ribs and leaves your mouth tasting like damp stone. You sit up slowly, muscles stiff from too many nights on a cot stuffed with straw and regrets, and look around the barracks. The smell hits you next. Thick, sour, clinging. It's been creeping in for days now, riding on the backs of sweat and smoke, but today it's stronger, rancid, human. You already know what it means. Someone is sick, actually more than one. 2 cots down, a soldier groans and rolls over, clutching his stomach. His skin is waxy, his lips pale. Across the room, another is curled into a tight ball, muttering fevered nonsense. You watch one of the stewards douse a rag in vinegar and press it over his nose. The effect is purely psychological. It started. You'd hoped the worst would come from the outside. Arrows, ladders, siege towers wrapped in fire. But no, it's coming from within. The latrines are backing up. The water tastes wrong, and the smell, dear saints, the smell, sits in your throat like a curse. The captain announces a quarantine by midday. Too late, of course. Whatever it is, dysentery, fever, something worse, has already spread. The chapel is converted into a makeshift infirmary, its pews shoved aside to make room for cots and water basins. The priest tries to hide his unease, but even he's started wearing gloves. There's no medicine, not really. Just boiled herbs, vinegar washes and whispered prayers. The apothecary does what he can, but you can see the fear in his eyes. He's already burned through his dried rosemary and crushed lavender, and now he's resorting to smearing mustard paste on people's chests, which smells exactly how you think it does. No one wants to go near the sick, but someone has to feed them, clean them, turn their bodies when they moan too loudly. So you take your turn. Everyone does. Rotating shifts, faces covered with cloth soaked in vinegar or wine. It doesn't help much. You feel the heat of the fevered skin through your gloves, watch the way their eyes go glassy as they stop responding, and then one dies. Not in a dramatic sword between the ribs kind of way, quietly. Slipping away overnight, face turned toward the wall like he just gave up mid-dream. The body's carried out before dawn and burned behind the smithy. A small fire, no ceremony, just one less mouth to feed, one more sign that things are unravelling. By the third day, a dozen more are sick. The rumours begin to spread even faster than the disease. It's the rats, someone says. They're in the grain. Or maybe it was the well. Didn't it take a hit during the last catapult strike? A few soldiers whisper that this is the enemy's work, that someone inside brought something in. Poison, filth, something dark and alchemical. People are starting to believe anything, everything. No one's drinking from the same cup twice. Meals are eaten in silence. Shared spoons are now the stuff of horror stories. You watch a group of guards try to dig a new latrine trench farther from the main yard. They don't make it far. The soil is too rocky, the tools too blunt. They give up after half a day, covered in filth and guilt. The old latrines overflow that night. The stench is unbearable. You're summoned to the keep the next morning for a sanitation detail, which it turns out is just a fancy way of saying you'll be hauling buckets of human waste away from the main corridors and dumping them somewhere less vital. You're given rags, gloves, and a noseful of regret. You try to think about anything else. The food, the sky, a time before everything smelled like failure. The worst part isn't the work. It's that you find yourself grateful to have work. Movement, action, a reason to focus on something besides the walls that keep closing in. There's one guard, Thorn, he calls himself, who seems unaffected by all of it. He jokes as he works, even as he scrapes sludge from a hallway corner. "Guess this is the real battleground, eh?" he says, grinning like a man trying to make the best of being ankle-deep in despair. You laugh, weakly. It's all you can do. And still, the disease spreads. The priest blesses the walls of the chapel, then lights incense and refuses to go back inside. The apothecary has barricaded himself in a supply room, mixing what little he has into strange-smelling potions that are probably just wine, honey, and desperation. The cook starts boiling everything. Water, soup, socks, maybe. Hard to tell. The food is now a paste of barley and regret. You eat it anyway. One soldier, convinced the sickness is punishment from above, starts fasting and praying loudly at every hour. By day 4, he's collapsed, and now no one wants to go near him either. Not because they're mad, but because they're afraid he's contagious too. You remember reading, or being told really, that during long sieges disease killed more than enemy blades ever did. You used to think that sounded exaggerated. Now, you believe it. You feel it. The fear isn't cinematic, it's subtle. It's in the way people stop touching each other, stop speaking. How they sleep turned away, wrapped tight like mummies, like they can shut the sickness out with cloth. One night you help carry another body to the burn pit. This one is small, light, barely even a man yet. You don't remember his name. You try not to. A name means something, means grief. He's wrapped in a threadbare blanket and carried by 4 guards who don't speak. The fire is lit. The blanket burns fast. After that you scrub your hands until the skin cracks. The next morning you wake up sweating. Not from heat. You sit up slowly, testing your limbs. Head pounding, throat dry. You press your palm to your forehead. Warm, too warm. You lie back down, staring at the wooden beams above you, and listen to the muffled sounds of others moving in the barracks. Some coughing, some groaning, someone laughing strangely. You swallow hard. It's started. It's you now. But you get up anyway, because the wall still stands, and someone has to be there when it falls. By midday the air is thick with smoke. Not the usual kind from cook fires or smouldering dung, but real, roiling, angry smoke. The kind that comes from burning siege towers and wet timber. The kind that sticks to your lungs and makes your eyes weep even when your soul doesn't. You stand on the wall, wrapped in sweat and grime and something that might be a fever, and you watch as the world below your castle erupts. They've stopped waiting. The enemy is advancing in full. It begins without fanfare. No drums, no horns, no polite herald riding up to offer one last chance at surrender. Just the groan of wood, the shouts of men, and the sight of siege towers being rolled toward your outer wall, massive things covered in wet hides to protect them from fire. Behind them come the ladders. Behind those, the flood of bodies. Armour gleams. Flags wave. This is not a raid. It's not a test. This is the final assault. You don't have time to think. You don't even have time to feel afraid. Orders are shouted. Arrows loosed. You take your place at the parapet, a half-full quiver at your side, and you start shooting. The enemy comes in waves. You hit a man square in the chest, watch him fall. The next takes his place, and the next. They swarm the base of the wall like ants, their movements mechanical, relentless. They haul the ladders forward, raise them with practiced ease. You knock another arrow. Loose, reload. Somewhere near the south tower a cry goes up. They're breaching. You glance down and see the first ladder hit the stone. A second follows, then 10, a dozen. You've practiced for this. You've trained for this. But nothing prepares you for the moment when the enemy's climbing your walls like they belong here. The first one over the parapet is met by a hammer. One of your fellow guards, silent as a statue, smashes the invader's helmet in like it's made of clay. Another climbs over the edge and gets an arrow through the throat. But for every one you kill, 2 more appear. There's no time to celebrate, no time to think. You fight, and everything burns. The defenders had a plan, they always do. You see it play out now, flames poured from the upper walls, oil ignited in controlled bursts. The siege towers are targeted first. Archers dip their arrows in pitch and fire them at the wooden monstrosities. One catches, then another, but the enemy is prepared too. They've soaked the towers in mud, draped them in hides. The fire spreads slowly, reluctantly, but it spreads. One tower reaches the wall. A drawbridge slams down. Screaming men pour out, and all you can do is hold. You don't remember how many you kill. You stop counting after 4. Your arm aches from drawing your bow. You switch to your sword. You swing, duck, parry, push, scream. The sound is deafening. Metal on metal, wood splintering, bodies colliding. Someone beside you falls with a gurgle, blood pumping from a wound you can't even see. A soldier in enemy colours lunges at you. You sidestep, trip him, drive your boot into his ribs and stab downward. You feel the blade hit something soft. He doesn't scream. You don't either. At some point the oil runs out. The fire gutters. The gatehouse takes a hit from a battering ram you didn't even see approach. The portcullis holds, for now. But the wooden supports groan with every impact. And then it gets worse. From the north comes a new sound. Horns. Not yours. Reinforcements? Too far. Too late. No. It's a second wave. You spot new banners rising over the hill. Fresh troops pouring in. Not enough to be a new army, but enough to push the balance. They've been holding them back. Waiting for this moment. Classic tactic. Wear the defenders down, then send in the clean ones to finish the job. You retreat from the parapet. Not out of fear, but necessity. You fall back to the next wall. The castle was designed for this. Layers. As one wall becomes compromised, defenders retreat to the next ring. It's ugly. It's desperate. But it works. Sometimes. The courtyard is already in chaos. The stables are ablaze. The grain store is lost. The kitchen's gone dark. Smoke chokes the air. Children and elderly huddle in corners while soldiers form makeshift lines near the inner keep. The captain appears, his armour blackened, blood streaking down one side of his face. He sees you and nods, like he can still count on you. He's wrong. You're not sure how much more you have to give. But you nod back. And then someone throws open the chapel doors. It's filled with the sick you forgot, you tried to forget. A guard drags a coughing man into the open air. The soldiers back away. No one wants to fight next to plague victims. But there's no choice now. The castle's too small. The walls are gone. The sick are the walls. You take position near the keep's entrance, sword in one hand, shield in the other. You're not alone. A dozen of you stand shoulder to shoulder. Behind you is everything that's left. everything that matters. The final push comes fast. No siege tower now, just raw numbers, ladders, ropes, men with nothing left to lose. You brace, you breathe, you fight, you are stabbed, somewhere in the side. It's not deep, it's not fatal. You hope, you keep fighting. A man grabs your shield and tries to pull you forward. You let him. It throws him off balance. You bury your blade in his leg. He howls. You shove him off the wall. Time stretches. Seconds feel like hours. Then, a horn. This one is familiar. You freeze. On the far ridge, above the burning tree line, a new banner rises. Not theirs, yours. So you laugh or cry, maybe both. The others see it too. The captain stares. The enemy pauses. And then, from the trees, they ride. Cavalry. Reinforcements. Not a myth. Not a rumour. Real steel. Real banners. Real help. The enemy scatters. Or tries to. Some hold the gate. Others flee back toward the siege towers. You don't give chase. You can't. You drop to your knees, gasping, bleeding, surrounded by fire and bodies and stones soaked in too much history. But you're alive. The castle still stands, battered, burned, but not broken. The smoke doesn't clear. Not for hours. Even after the enemy is scattered, even after the gates are secured again and the banners of your allies rise high above the scorched ramparts, the smoke lingers, clinging to stone, to skin, to every memory etched into the now broken courtyard. You walk through it slowly, dazed, sword dragging behind you like it's forgotten how to be lifted. The adrenaline has drained out of you, leaving your limbs rubbery, your vision blurred around the edges. You've survived. Somehow. You just don't know what part of you did. Reinforcements arrived just in time, not heroically, not with a blaring fanfare or a swooping cavalry charge across the drawbridge, but in the most honest, practical way. They came when the fighting was already at its worst, and they fought through it. They breached the enemy's rear lines, set fire to their supply wagons, and pressed in until the siege broke like an overstrained rope. There's no clean victory here, only fire and exhaustion, and the dull understanding that death could have gone either way. Now the castle is quiet except for the coughing. That awful, rattling cough still echoes from the chapel, the barracks, the courtyards, anywhere the sick still lie in feverish heaps, too weak to celebrate, too stubborn to die. You visit the chapel first, even though you don't want to. You feel it's owed. The doors hang open, candles flicker along the stone walls, barely holding back the gloom. Inside, the air is warm and wet with the scent of illness. You pass the makeshift cots, the priest with bloodshot eyes, the apprentice medic trying to mix herbs with shaking hands. Several bodies are covered now, blankets drawn over faces. There are fewer moans. You don't know if that means healing or the opposite. You recognise one face, an archer you shared a joke with a few days ago. His eyes are closed, his chest doesn't move. You nod, not to anyone, just to the moment. Then you step outside before it settles too deep in your bones. The courtyard is worse than you remember. The granary is a black shell. One of the towers has half collapsed from fire. Burned ladders lie twisted across the stone like the bones of some enormous beast that died trying to crawl over the walls. You pass the stables, where someone's trying to salvage anything from the ash. One of the surviving goats bleats angrily at a fresh bucket of water, like it somehow caused this mess. The reinforcements, bless them, are already setting up camp outside the castle walls. Not inside. There's talk of infection, and they're not willing to risk bringing it into their own ranks. Can't blame them. You watch them work, efficient and calm. They've done this before. This is their job. Show up late, clean up the mess, save the day just in time to take credit and half the surviving supplies. It's tradition. Your captain stands near the gate, speaking to the commander of the new host. The two of them speak low and serious. You don't hear the words, but you don't need to. You already know what it sounds like. "Well fought," the commander will say. "We were dying in here," your captain will reply. "And you didn't surrender," says the commander, "or didn't have time." The reinforcements brought medics, not many but enough to start triage. They also brought bread, real bread. You eat a piece, still warm, slightly soft, a miracle, and almost cry when it hits your tongue. You see others doing the same, a few tears, a few laughs that sound more like hiccups. Someone hugs the cook. He drops his ladle and pretends he didn't enjoy it. You're assigned to one of the post-siege cleanup teams, which, as it turns out, is just a polite way of saying, "Go gather the bodies." The field outside the castle is littered with them. Soldiers, archers, boys pretending to be men, men who'd clearly forgotten they were once boys. The dead lie in twisted shapes, broken armour, mouths open to the sky. You stop looking at faces after the first hour. You dig trenches with shaking hands. Not because you're afraid, but because you're exhausted. Your fever isn't gone. It simmers quietly under your skin, a reminder that the worst might still be coming. But you keep digging. The dirt is heavy, damp, unwilling. It wants to keep the dead. Later, you stand over the pit as bodies are lowered in, one after another. No names, no prayers, just weight and gravity. The priest tries to say something meaningful, but he's hoarse and doesn't get far. You say your own silent words, not for them, for you. You return to the barracks and collapse onto your cot. Someone's put a clean blanket there. Small kindness. It smells like lavender, faint and probably stolen from the Lord's private stores. You don't care. You wrap it around yourself and stare at the ceiling. There's talk that the enemy has fully withdrawn. Some fled. Others surrendered. A few still linger in the woods, likely starving, hoping for a miracle of their own. There's even a rumour that the attacking commander was captured, dragged from a burning siege tower, screaming orders no one could hear over the flames. You hope it's true. You also don't care. The castle is still standing, yes, but it's not the same. The stones are cracked, the walls scorched. The keep has holes in it now, literal ones, where the fire chewed through the roof and the wind whistles through like a ghost looking for its name. And the people, well, some survived intact. Others are missing pieces. Not arms or legs necessarily, though that too, but smaller pieces. Smiles, hope, trust. The saboteur, whoever they were, was never found. Some think they died in the final assault. Others say they slipped away with the attackers. Either way, no one speaks of it now. It's easier that way. The next morning the sun rises clear. The first time in weeks. The smoke finally clears. You stand on the wall again. Same place where you first saw the enemy. Same view. Very different eyes. You think about how castles defend themselves. Not just with walls or arrows or boiling oil. Not even with clever captains or brave soldiers. But with grit. With holding on when everything says to let go. With standing in muck and blood and sickness and still saying not yet. Not today. The reinforcements offer you a transfer. You can leave with them. Travel somewhere clean. Safer. You think about it. You even start to say yes. But then you look back at the courtyard, scorched and muddy, and you stay, because the castle didn't fall, and neither did you. You'd think that after the battle was over, after the last arrow had flown and the last enemy had either fled or bled out on the stones, things would get better, that people would cheer, embrace, maybe sing songs in the courtyard around a fresh fire and the smell of bread. But what actually happens after a siege is more complicated, more quiet, and not the peaceful kind. The aftermath isn't clean. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like rot finally left the building, and now you have to mop the floor. The morning after the last burial, the castle wakes to a groan, not from the wounded or the walls, but from the people. Everything hurts. The stone feels colder. The wind blows through the ruins of the tower and moans like something's still trying to get in. You don't even react anymore. You've seen too much, smelled too much, slept too little. Your boots squish through mud thickened with ash. The fires are out, but the ground's still soft where siege engines burned. Blackened wood lies like carcasses across the outer yard. The smith shakes his head as he surveys the damage to his forge. Half his tools warped, the bellows punctured, his apprentice missing 3 fingers but pretending it's no big deal. Inside, it's worse. The kitchen ceiling collapsed from fire damage. The granary is a hole in the ground. The chapel smells like death masked by incense. The main hall, once a place of banquets and arguments and the occasional thrown chicken leg, is now just a cracked floor and smashed table, a broken chair still lodged in the hearth. You help with repairs, though your body protests every movement. Your side still aches where you were stabbed, just deep enough to hurt, not enough to kill. The apothecary gave you a poultice that smells like cat urine and spoiled pears. You wear it anyway. It's that or let the wound fester. You've seen too many do that already. The people, those who survived, move like ghosts. They don't talk much, just nod, grunt, pass each other tools or bowls or blankets, with the hollow efficiency of people who have learned to keep going because stopping is worse. The children don't laugh. They sit quietly by the chapel or sweep the floor or stare at the horizon. You remember when one of them tried to climb the wall to see the enemy tents. He doesn't speak anymore. The lord of the castle, once a proud figure in velvet and steel, now wears the same armour every day, scuffed and dented, and sits in a half-burnt chair, going over lists of the dead with the steward. Sometimes he stops, rubs his face, and says nothing for a long time. And then there's you. You've seen things, done things, some of them brave, some necessary, some you'll carry in silence. You take a walk around the ramparts to clear your head. The wind bites. The flags, what's left of them, flap weakly against the poles. You pass scorch marks, bloodstains that still linger, even after scrubbing. You reach the south wall and pause. That's where the breach started. You still see it. The tower crumbling, the ladders rising, the panic. You touch the stone where the wall gave way. It's cold. They're already talking about rebuilding. The masons drawn up plans, the carpenters measuring lengths of timber. Reinforcements will be brought in. The new sections will be stronger, better. That's the idea anyway. But you wonder, can you truly rebuild something like this, after all it's been through? Or will it always wear its scars no matter how much mortar you slap on? The reinforcements are still camped outside, though most of them are preparing to move on. War elsewhere. Always is. The commander stops by the inner gate and offers a nod of respect. You nod back. No words needed. He saw what you endured. He didn't live it, but he knows. There's a difference between sympathy and understanding. He offers you another transfer, a place in his column, more food, cleaner clothes, safer roads, a new start. You turn him down, again. You're not sure why. Maybe it's stubbornness, or guilt, or just the fact that this place, burned and broken as it is, feels like the only thing that still makes sense. You defended it. You bled for it. If you leave now, it's like admitting the enemy won something anyway. So you stay. You start working with the masons, hauling stone, clearing rubble. It's slow, back-breaking work, but it makes the hours pass. One day, you find a charm buried under a collapsed parapet. It's crude. A wooden figure carved with shaking hands, probably meant for luck. You keep it in your pocket. Not because you believe it works, but because someone did. You get used to the new rhythm. Wake, eat, work, rest, repeat. Some of the defenders are starting to speak again. Jokes even, dry, bitter, gallows humour, but humour all the same. The kind that says, we're not okay, but we're here. The cook finds a surviving jar of honey. He stirs it into porridge and calls it a feast. You laugh for the first time in days. There's a celebration planned of sorts. Not for victory, that would feel wrong, but for survival. A small gathering in the courtyard. Candles. Bread. Maybe even music if someone can fix the old lute that's missing 3 strings. The Lord gives a speech. Short. Honest. He doesn't praise the walls or the weapons. He praises the people. The ones who stayed. The ones who held. Someone begins to sing. Quiet at first. A hymn. One you heard during the early days of the siege. The melody floats upward into the night sky, and for a moment you forget about the smoke, the blood, the screams. You just hear a song. You think about the saboteur again. Still unknown. Still a mystery. Some say they fled. Others say they died in the chaos. Part of you wonders if it matters anymore. The damage was done. The castle held despite them. Maybe that's what matters most. The next morning you go to the top of the tower, what's left of it, and you watch the sunrise. It paints the ruined stone gold and red and everything in between. You breathe it in. It's the same sun as before the siege. It just feels different now. You survived the fire. Now comes the ash. And after that, maybe something green. The noise of hammers becomes your new soundtrack. Sharp, rhythmic, constant. Day and night, they ring through the courtyard like the heartbeat of a place trying to pull itself back together. You wake to it, work to it, sleep in spite of it. The castle, cracked and coughing, has entered its next phase. Not survival, not mourning, but rebuilding. And with it comes a quiet evolution of its defences. The scars will stay, yes, but now they're being used to shape what comes next. You're assigned to a team repairing the curtain wall, the long stretch of stone where the enemy siege tower struck hardest. The gap left behind is wide enough for a cart to pass through sideways. It looks like a tooth knocked out of the castle's jaw. Dangerous and embarrassing. It needs fixing. Fast. The masons argue about the best method. Some want to rebuild exactly as it was. Others argue for an improvement, thicker walls, angled buttresses, a layer of iron reinforcements. A young apprentice even proposes a dual-layered wall with a hollow channel between, to trap attackers inside. Like a stone sandwich of death, he says proudly. No one laughs, but you can tell they're tempted. That's the thing about castles. They're never really finished. They're constantly adapting to new threats, new weapons, new madnesses dreamed up by people who want to get inside. You've already seen that firsthand. Siege engines have evolved. So must the walls. You help with the haul. Stone blocks as heavy as broken promises, buckets of mortar that smell like chalk and frustration. Everything gets patched, braced, tested. A new hoarding is designed. Wooden platforms that jut out from the wall top so defenders can fire straight down. Simple. Effective. Cheap enough to replace if burned. Some argue to build permanent machicolations instead, stone drop points, but it'll take longer. Resources are scarce, so the builders compromise. Wood now, stone later. Every part of the castle is under review. The gatehouse, still stained from the final assault, gets a new portcullis made of thick, iron-bound oak. The engineers test it every day. Drop it, raise it, drop it again, until it doesn't even shudder when it slams down. The murder holes above are widened slightly, allowing for heavier objects to be tossed. One guard volunteers to test it using a melon. The melon doesn't survive. Neither does the guard's dignity when the fruit explodes prematurely and coats him in pulp. You're reassigned to the inner wall next. There, an older knight leads a small group of defenders in a workshop on emergency fallback tactics. You think it's going to be a lecture. It's not. It's a series of full-contact drills with dull swords, overturned tables, and lots of yelling. You end up bruised, winded, and a little humiliated, but also, strangely, grateful. The knight has a point. The outer defences are only part of the story. True defence is layered, depth over height. If the enemy gets past the first wall, you need to make sure the second wall is worse, and the third, utter hell. Castles that survived the longest weren't always the tallest or the thickest. They were the smartest. Designed like traps, not just shelters, so the layout changes. Corridors are narrowed, corners are sharpened, new gates are added between sections. Secret passages, once sealed to prevent sabotage, are reopened and rerouted with more reliable locks and signals. You're taught new whistle codes. 2 short blasts for retreat, 1 long for breach. A strange bird call for, we don't know what it is, but it's probably bad. The guard rotations change again. Now it's 4-hour shifts overlapping with surprise inspections. The captain has adopted a permanent scowl and a clipboard. No one escapes his rounds. Even the cook's ladle gets a suspicious glance. What's more impressive than the upgrades themselves is the mindset. Before, you defended out of necessity. Now you're preparing with intent. It's different. Better. Maybe even hopeful. You sit with the engineer one evening watching the sun dip behind the hills while she sketches plans for a new drawbridge mechanism. Why not just build a stronger gate, you ask? She shrugs. A gate can be broken, but a bridge can be dropped. It sticks with you. Defense isn't about strength. It's about options. Flexibility. Knowing when to hold the line and when to make the enemy fall into a muddy pit full of sharp sticks. You wander the yard later and find another team working on the well. They've reinforced the shaft with stone and added a second pulley in case one fails. The water has been tested. Clean, finally. Someone lights a candle and sets it at the base of the well in thanks. The candle's still there the next day, untouched. A small miracle. The chapel too has changed. Now that the sick are gone, some recovered, some buried, the space is reclaimed. Not just for prayer, but as a quiet command centre. Maps hang from the walls. Reports are logged. Scouts check in twice daily. The priest doesn't mind. He says faith is action now. You pass the barracks one evening and hear laughter. Real laughter. Someone's retelling the story of the goat that knocked over a ladder during the siege. Hero of the castle, someone says. We should give it a medal. You look around and see soldiers smiling, laughing, eating porridge that doesn't look like regret. It's not quite peace, but it's not war either. There's an old argument among scholars about concentric castles. Fortresses designed with multiple walls, one inside the other, each higher and deadlier than the last. Some say they were overkill. Others say they were perfection. The culmination of centuries of siege learning boiled down into brutal, beautiful geometry. You've seen one now. Not just the layout, but the people. How you become a series of defences, one inside the other. Body, will, mind. The castle still stands, and it's learning. Every wall rebuilt isn't just stone, it's memory. Every trap added is a scar turned into a weapon. Every laugh over burnt stew is a quiet rebellion against fear. You close your eyes that night with the sound of hammers still in the air, rhythmic, strong, and behind it the heartbeat of a place that has chosen not just to survive, but to be ready. The first time you hear the whisper, it's from a stable boy who swears on his last tooth that he saw a pale woman in white standing on the wall at dawn, her feet not touching the stone, her eyes empty like the sky before a storm. You smile, of course, nod, pretend like you're interested, but you brush it off as trauma and too little sleep. He's a child, after all, and it's been a brutal few weeks, until you hear it again, and then again. Different people, same woman, same wall, always dawn. By the time the seventh person brings her up, this time a hard-faced archer who's survived 3 sieges and doesn't believe in much of anything, you stop laughing, and you stop asking questions, because the truth is this place has changed. And not just structurally, you can feel it in the stones. The castle defends itself, yes, that much you've lived through, but some say it still defends itself, even now after the siege has passed. Long after the blood's been scrubbed from the floors and the bones buried deep. They say some of the dead didn't really leave. It begins with sounds, footsteps when no one's there, the rattle of chains in towers long emptied, doors that close when the wind's not blowing, or open when no one's near. The mason's apprentice drops a hammer from the parapet one evening and swears he heard someone laugh as it fell. You tell him it was probably a bird. You don't believe yourself. Later that week, 2 guards on the night watch report seeing torchlight bobbing along the outer wall, but the patrol was accounted for. The guards climb down to investigate and find nothing. No footprints, no lingering scent of oil, just that same cold patch of air that seems to move of its own accord, like the wind's thinking about something. You don't tell anyone about the time you were in the old cellar, fetching preserved fruit from the single remaining jar, and heard someone whisper your name from the shadows behind the barrels. You turned. Nothing. You checked again. No echo. But you still didn't take the fruit. The castle's older than most, remember. Older than the siege. Older than the records say, probably. Layers have been built over layers, stone on stone, hall over hall, like rings of a tree. And sometimes, at night, you swear the place groans, not just from settling, but from remembering. The priest doesn't help. He's been more withdrawn lately, keeping to the chapel, muttering Latin verses that no one asked for. When questioned about the woman on the wall, he says, "Some places are touched, not cursed, not blessed, just aware that doesn't make you feel better." One of the scholars, newly arrived with the reinforcements, claims he found an old ledger deep in the archives, dusty, half-burned, barely readable, but it tells of a similar siege, hundreds of years ago. Same castle, same spot, similar layout. A winter siege, this one, ended in famine. The defenders lit the last of their torches, then opened the gates and vanished into the snow. No bodies were found, only silence. After reading that, you start noticing things. The same worn grooves in the stone steps that lead nowhere, the outline of an old door sealed behind plaster, the words carved into the back of a parapet, "Still we wait." You don't know who wrote them. You don't think you want to. There's a corner of the keep now that people just avoid, the one near the stairs where the saboteur was last seen. A draft moves through there, always cold, always wrong. Someone tried to light a torch there once, it wouldn't catch. They tried again, and again. The flame just sputtered out. The torch was fine everywhere else. The goat, yes, that goat, is still alive and kicking, but it won't go near that corner either. And let's be honest, if the goat's scared, you're scared. It's not just the ghosts of the dead people whisper about, it's the castle itself, like it's watching, waiting, testing you. Every now and then, you hear someone mutter, "She's angry today," when the wind howls through the courtyard, or when the walls groan during the night. The she in question. No one's sure. The castle? The woman on the wall? The land itself? That's the thing about places like this. Stories grow like weeds in bloodied soil. And after a siege, the line between story and memory blurs. One mason refuses to work past dusk now. He says the stones feel different then. He can't explain it, only that sometimes they hum, just at the edge of hearing, like something beneath them is trying to get out. You'd laugh, if not for what happened to Tom. Tom was a young guard, barely old enough to shave. He'd survived the siege mostly by luck and kept to himself afterward. One morning, he was found on the tower stairs, curled into a ball, eyes wide open, not blinking. He was alive, but something inside him wasn't. He never spoke again. Some think he saw something. Others say he heard something. His lips moved like he was whispering, but no sound came out, not even when the priest shouted verses in his face. They moved Tom to the chapel for safekeeping. He sits in the back pew now, staring at the altar. Sometimes you think you see his lips moving again, like he's praying, but you've never seen him blink. And then there's the dream. You've had it 3 times now. You're standing on the wall just before dawn. Everything is quiet. The castle is whole, unburned, unbroken. There's no smoke, no blood. It's like the siege never happened, but you're alone, utterly, not a soul in sight. And in the distance, just past the horizon, you see them. Figures, thousands of them, silent, staring. They don't move. They don't need to. You always wake before they reach the gate. You don't tell anyone about the dream. The thing is, maybe this place is haunted, but not by ghosts. Maybe it's haunted by memory, by the weight of every footstep, every drop of blood, every whispered betrayal, and last breath screamed into the wind. Maybe castles like this hold on to what we leave behind, not to punish us, but to warn us. And you stay. Because now, when you patrol the wall, when you hear those footsteps that shouldn't be there, when you see the woman in white at dawn, you don't feel afraid. You feel watched, but not unwelcome. The castle knows you. You helped it survive. And now, you wonder if it's helping you. By now, the castle has gone quiet again. Not the silence of despair like during the siege, not the hush of aftermath, where every sound felt like a reminder of what was lost. This is something softer, deeper, a stillness that doesn't press down, it settles, like dust on old stone, like breath exhaled after holding it too long. Whatever was going to happen has happened, and now you live in the after. You begin your days the same way, up with the sun, boots laced by habit, armour loosened to keep your healing wound from pulling. The wall patrol feels less urgent now, but you still walk it, partly to keep the rhythm alive, partly because the view has become strangely comforting. It's autumn now. The leaves have turned, the air is sharp, and the trees beyond the castle wear rust and gold like old kings in their twilight. You watch them sway, and for the first time in months the movement doesn't make your body tense. People are returning to themselves piece by piece. The blacksmith reforges broken weapons and on slow afternoons crafts tiny iron animals for the children. One of the goats head-butted a squire last week and was rewarded with a garland of turnips, which she now wears like a crown. You laugh when you see it. A real, surprised laugh. The kind that shakes dust off your lungs and makes the corners of your eyes sting a little. The castle's bruises are fading too. The tower still bears scorch marks. The walls are rough with new mortar, like hastily stitched wounds. But there's strength in it now. Intent. You run your hand along the new stone, feeling its warmth in the morning sun, and think, we made this better. Even after everything, we made it better. One afternoon you find yourself on the same wall where you first saw the siege begin. You remember the line of enemies in the distance, the fluttering banners, the crawling dread in your chest. And now, all you see is grass, birds. The path they came from is gone, grown over, like the land itself decided to forget. But you haven't. None of you have. And yet, no one talks about the siege much anymore, not directly. You'll hear pieces, little stories at supper. Someone jokes about the time they slipped on blood during the tower breach. Another remembers a botched arrow shot that somehow hit the enemy cook. The cook survived, and then joined your side. But no one speaks of the worst day, the final push, the flames, the fear, the almost collapse. It's not denial, it's reverence. Like everyone knows the weight of it is too much for daily conversation, so you carry it quietly, like a scar beneath your tunic. You don't have to show it. Everyone already knows it's there. The saboteur was never found. The trail went cold long ago. Every now and then, a guard will mention something odd. A misplaced key, a footprint where there shouldn't be one, but nothing solid. You've all moved past the anger. What remains is something more like wariness. The lesson stuck. Trust is a privilege. Earned, not assumed. But that doesn't mean you've turned against each other. If anything, you're closer, more honest. You've all seen what breaks and what holds, and you've chosen to keep holding. Your role has shifted. You're no longer just a guard. You've become something in between. Protector, builder, historian. You help with planning new defences, walk newcomers through the rebuilt tower, explain what used to be here and what it cost to change it. You tell them about the ghost stories too, but only after dark. It's tradition now. People laugh, but no one sleeps near the old cellar anymore. The woman on the wall hasn't been seen for days. Maybe she's resting. Maybe she only appears when the castle is in danger. Or maybe, just maybe, she was never a ghost, just a reflection of grief, of defiance, of the castle's need to be witnessed. You think about her often, especially during dawn patrol. Sometimes you pause and whisper good morning to the empty rampart, just in case. The dreams have changed too. No more armies on the horizon, no more silent watchers. Now you dream of the walls from above, like you're flying, or maybe falling upward. You see the shapes of the corridors, the lines of defence, the geometry of war turned into something almost elegant. And in every dream, there's light. Not fire, sunlight, morning. One evening you visit the chapel just to sit. It's quiet except for the soft shuffle of the priest sweeping the floor. He nods at you but doesn't speak. You take a seat in the back pew, close your eyes, and breathe. The wood creaks beneath you. The stone hums with distant warmth. It's strange how even places touched by death can still feel sacred. You think of all the castles out there still standing, and all the ones that didn't. You think of the people who built this one, and those who rebuilt it. You wonder how many times a place has to fall before it becomes something unbreakable. When you leave the chapel, the sky's streaked with colour, lavender and gold. A light wind moves through the courtyard, carrying the scent of cut hay and baked bread. The cook has found a new recipe involving onions and courage. It's not great, but it's food, and no one throws it this time. That night you climb to the highest tower. What's left of it? Just a platform, really, with a partial railing and a view that takes your breath, if not your fear. You sit. Let the cool stone press against your back. Let the air tangle your hair. Below you the castle breathes, lives, waits. You close your eyes and rest your hand on the stone beside you. "I'm still here," you whisper. And from the way the wind curls around your shoulders, from the creak in the wood, the hush in the bricks, the soft settling of the night, you think maybe the castle answers, "So am I." So now here you are, back where it all started. Maybe not on the same wall, or standing in the same boots, but close enough. The air tastes different now, fresher. The trees are putting out their last leaves before winter comes again, but there's something softer in the wind. Less threat, more promise. The castle is quiet tonight. Not eerie quiet, not haunted quiet, just calm. The kind of silence you earn after months of chaos. The kind that only comes once you've rebuilt the last door, buried the last ghost, and decided that life gets to go on. You lean against the rampart and think about what it really means for a place to be defended. It's not just walls or moats or burning oil and arrows, though let's be honest, those definitely helped. It's people. It's patience. It's the unglamorous, gritty, often disgusting business of staying put day after day, even when everything says you should run. Castles don't survive because they're tall. They survive because someone decides they're worth saving. You look down into the courtyard one more time. The lights are out. The goat's snoring. The cook's probably fallen asleep with his ladle again. And somewhere below, the stones remember. They always do. You take a deep breath, lean back from the ledge and head inside. The torches flicker gently in their sconces. No alarms, no screams. Just the warmth of a place that stood its ground, and the people who did too. The castle defended itself, and so did you. Sleep well tonight. You've earned it.